this into the right thing. All right. We are back. It is a new year. It is Monday morning in Taipei. It is Sunday night in Washington, D.C. Um, we have a lot of discussion of economics and environmentalism in the chat today, specifically lawns. I don't know why we still have lawns. There's some people that are really into lawns, but I think that was kind of a 1950s, 1960s thing. I think we can easily move away from lawns. They are not environmentally great. It's interesting that we're so focused on economics and environmentalism. Right now, so undergrad I double majored in environmental studies and economics, and so it's kind of interesting. So there's actually two different schools of thought when it comes to economics and environmentalism. One is environmental economics, which is this idea that the economy can grow forever. GDP can grow forever. We just have to move away from resource-based growth to service-based growth, and everything will be fine. And then there's this other idea of ecological economics, which is this idea that the world is resources, and our GDP is this growing balloon inside resources, and eventually it'll consume all of resources, and then you can't have any more GDP growth and all of the resources are exhausted. And so I guess I think I kind of believe something in between, like maybe the balloon were outside of the block of resources, and then, something like that. Maybe I believe a kind of hybrid. It's a little bright, so I don't know if this is too distracting to show. But the interesting thing about economics is if anybody's really interested in economics, the best way to really understand and get a good background in economics is actually to go down the list of people that won the Nobel Prize each year and just look into why they won the Nobel Prize that year. And you'll get a really good background on the history of economics and where the field is going, and they're really good actually in picking who the important hip economists are, and then years later it shifts and changes, and you learn a lot about economics through who the different schools of thought. For example, you can go way back and find that the guy that won the Nobel Prize for 1 year was a guy who invented the concept of GDP. His name was Kuznets. And later he even thought, he was hired by the government to come up with the concept. And at the time he didn't even like it. And later he was like, no, like GDP is kind of a crap concept. The government shouldn't be using it. I understand I invented it and I won a Nobel Prize. But it's really bad. And so now there's another economist named Joseph Stiglitz who also won the Nobel Prize, who spends all of his time trashing GDP as a concept. We do in politics. I think we're doing whatever comes along. But man, everybody is on the lawns. I heard that we could go at least from lawns to clover, and that there's better nitrogen that gets brought in from clover, and then you don't have to mow your lawn as much, and there's not as much yard waste. So it would at least be like a positive step in the right direction. Like a lot of people don't want big high grasses because they think that it'll have mosquitoes or something, but clover is probably pretty good. We'll see. No, you're not. Everything is about saying I'm definitely too dumb for this. No, most of academia and most of talking about anything is just learning the language and learning how to bullshit. So most things in life they have there's barriers of entry based on language, and some people talk about legalese with law. Law is not actually that complicated, but they invent new terms, and so then when you hear the terms, you feel really dumb, like you can't jump in the conversation. But once you kind of learn the terms, then you realize they're just talking like anybody else. But these barriers, whether they're intentional or not intentional, are always to keep out outsiders. But you know, um, okay. How about the Expanse? I've not tuned into the new season yet. I've been too busy watching everything else, like Wheel of Time and Hawkeye, and my wife wanted to watch Return to Hogwarts. I've never even seen all I've seen two Harry Potter movies, but she really, it's tough. But the Expanse, I'd gotten really into it. I was really disappointed with the last season. I wasn't too excited about it. I didn't think that the villain was too interesting, and I was really just pissed off about Naomi's like leap into space and her surviving that. But I loved the first season. I thought it was great. But and have I read the series? I read the first book. I've not read the rest. I understand that it gets it kind of the whole plot and everything kind of balloons and balloons. Yeah, but we'll see about this. Now, the thing on Harry Potter, it seems like so exhausting. There's just so much to it and so much lore. I feel like I'm late to the party. Like also everybody like um like, and now what's her face? She's not even hip anymore. Now she just posts her anti-trans stuff all the time. I feel like I'd be like really late to the party with Harry Potter. I don't know. Maybe, maybe it's kind of this funny thing because my wife is a huge Harry Potter fan, and I'm a huge Ice and Fire fan, and that she's never read the books or seen the show, and I've never read the books or seen the movies. I saw Fantastic Beasts, and I haven't. I saw Prisoner of Azkaban and Goblet of Fire. Those are the ones um from Meat House Man. Good name. Hey Preston, was your brand in the Squisher series hard to make? It's my favorite thing you've ever made. It was definitely challenging. Um, I think my series are becoming more and more difficult to make as time goes on, and a lot has to do with just my level of perfectionism and things like that keeps growing. Like if you see my first series, I'm just kind of throwing stuff out there, and then now I feel like I have to support everything a lot more now, and um, I don't know. I guess I'm getting more into higher thematic concepts of the series rather than just secret identities or something like that. So yeah, it was definitely in some ways it's easier because you're just dealing with the Brienne story and you don't have to be searching too many other places. Sometimes it's really tough when you're doing a series where there's references in other plot lines, and so I just have to read Brienne over and over again, and Jamie as well, and some Bran, which are fairly short in the grand scheme of things. So there's less stuff to sift through. Um, but it was definitely a challenging series to make. I think time traveling Bran has been my most challenging so far in my mind. Like I've been rewriting stuff and being like, well, this doesn't work, and thinking about everything, and there's actually very little information in Ice and Fire about time traveling Bran, and there's just a lot of speculation, and being able to say things without just being like, oh, I'm just pulling this out of my butt. But yeah, I think it was pretty difficult. But thank you for really liking Brienne. I thought it was I really liked the way the series came out too. I've been thinking about doing the Brienne series for many years, and then I'd never gotten around to it, and I was just like, no, I'm doing my Brienne series. It didn't come out how I thought it would. I thought there was going to be more squishers, and people were disappointed that there weren't as many squishers as there were. I know. Um, what's happening in Taipei? Well, they had New Year's, they had Christmas. Um, Christmas in East Asia is kind of funny because they don't really understand the concept. They think it's like a party day, and so like people have party hats and stuff on. Um, but remarkably, we found I looked up a place to try to get pictures with the kid. Like I wanted to find some Christmas trees, and so they did have some stuff down by the Taipei 101, the big skyscraper that was the Taipei 101 was the tallest building in the world from in around 2010, and now it's like the 11th tallest building in the world. So they had a Christmas market down there, and they there was actually like Glühwein, like German style Christmas market, which was fairly impressive. Um, and there was a lot of like people in reindeer outfits and such. And I would have loved to have like my kid getting good pictures with them, but there were far too many adults that were standing in line to get pictures the uh, with the reindeers and such. So adults are super into cutesy culture here, and so it's hard because they're doing all the things that the kids should be doing. Um, Not that like paying attention to Star Wars and fantasy stuff isn't kid stuff. Like we Westerners also indulge in lots of kid stuff, but they indulge in other kid stuff. So, but yeah, no, I mean it was about as Christmas as I could get for a country that has I think it's a 3.9% Christian population. Like there's not much Christmas here. Chinese New Year is much bigger holiday. So, what are we missing? I didn't want to miss things here. Um, what do you think about Trump encouraging people to get vaccinated all of a sudden? He was saying that earlier too. What makes the news is funny. Like, he can't get off of the fact that he believes that he created the vaccine. Like he talks about how like he created it as if like he was in a lab, like created it himself, and he really wants credit for that. He thinks it was this great thing that he did, and it's hard for him to switch narratives and say like, oh, you shouldn't get vaccinated. He did push the vaccine, and he pushed it a while ago. But I think people, they go crazy over that Candace Owens interview because Candace Owens just looks like an idiot. She looks like an absolute idiot. Where she's like, but come on, aren't there things we should question? And Trump's like, no, like this is my vaccine. I saved the world. And she's like, but the vaccine's horrible. And he's like, no. It was a really, really weird interview. Oh God. But I don't think it was all of a sudden. Like he was saying like in different, and like a few months ago when he had some rally, he got booed, and he got booed before that every time he brings it up. It's an interesting thing because we'd all perceived Trump supporters as like really being into the cult of personality that Trump is. And it kind of shows that no, the cult is about something else, something more insidious. Now I understand that there's feedback, like sometimes the cult leader can say something and then gets in people's minds, but this is it's an interesting situation where Trump is being booed by his most avid supporters. It's I don't know, it's hard to get in the mindset of what's going on, but man, what do we have here? World of Ice and Fire mentions Danny Storm in the last year of King Ares' reign. Also errors in your older video. Have you thought about fixing that? Or is there a mention of that storm? Let's I have to look that up. Because I've looked for mentions of that storm, but we should remember that the World of Ice and Fire is, it's a summary of things created by Elio. Um, Even though I, admittedly cite it a lot, but it is a weird thing. Like this, no one ever mentions this storm. I mean, they mention it in the show, but it's a little melodramatic. This storm that was breaking pieces off of Dragonstone, and then we go to Dragonstone, and Dragonstone is completely fine. Um, let's see. Let's find mentions of storm in the World of Ice and Fire. Doom of Valeria, the Conquest. Let's go down. Aegon the Second. Do. The Riverlands, the Fall. Aerys the Second. Taking it by storm. I don't see taking it by storm, down to storm. Storm King, Riverlands. I don't see any mention of this storm. So in the World of Ice and Fire. So if someone wants to, if there's an exact quote or something that you can grab me, because at least on a search for the word storm, I'm not finding it, but sometimes these searches are odd, so I'm not catching it. But or do you mean like in the app, like the World of Ice and Fire book, or there's like the app, which I don't even know who maintains that thing. But but yeah, the app I don't pay it. Look, one, I've never paid membership for the app. If you're talking about the app, and I don't know who maintains that app or where they get their information from. Certainly, George R. R. Martin doesn't have the time to go through that app and check all of the sources. So I don't necessarily the take much credence from that. But yeah, Robert brought on that storm. So, for some reason, Carmine has this real love of the Baratheons. I never understood it. I mean, when you've got the Aarons, like what more? Like, who could be better than the Aarons when you have the I mean, Sweet Robin, like who would win in a fight? Like Sweet Robin or Robert Baratheon? I mean, right? It would be Sweet Robin, right? I mean, he would just like fling a bowl of porridge at Robert's head. Plus Robert's dead. So, yeah. This is really funny. Is it still going? Do people still pay for the app? That would be very, very funny. That'd be very funny. Speaking of George, let's I wanted to bring up this the let me show you. Here we go. George's Twitter today. I wish the chat and things could go on the same time with my software here. But so George's tweet today. George's tweet, which him and his minions hanging for New Year's, and it's just one of the things I kind of wanted to think about, because I think about this a bit as being a small content creator in the grand scheme of things, but like just every comment is like, where's the next book, George? Where's Winds of Winter? Finish the book. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like now, granted, I don't even think he tweets. He even controls his Twitter. I don't, but he the but he's got to catch wind of some of these things every once in a while, right? Like he must know that all this kind of negative feedback where it's just nothing but like, where's Winds of Winter? Where's Winds of Winter? Where's Winds of Winter? And what that must do to somebody. I was talking with Carmine offline a little bit about Lindsay Ellis quitting YouTube. For those that don't know, Lindsay Ellis was a fairly big YouTuber who did some really, really excellent video essays. And then she was also on Twitter, and she misspoke on Twitter. She said something silly like she said that Raya the Last Dragon was kind of a ripoff on Avatar: The Last Airbender, which it is. And then people, some of her like the woke scolds were like, how dare you criticize this, minority created piece of art. And then she responded back, not thinking, and she said, well, if you squint at my comments, like maybe you can come up with something negative. And, the term squint, is negatively associated with Asians. And so she got trashed some more. And so now, for many of us with thick skin, like, you'd say, oh, it's no big deal. She's got tons of loyal followers. She does. She has tons of loyal followers. Like, it doesn't matter. She could have ignored them. But human beings aren't really like that. I think I was watching a little bit of Vosh, and he mentioned like most people in the world like can't deal with one person not liking them. Like my wife, for example, incredibly likable person, really likable person. And there's like this one person from college who doesn't like my wife. And like it doesn't bother her too much, but it's definitely like in her head like this one person from college that hates her, right? Like I've got thousands and thousands of people that hate me, both online and in real life. Like in real life, I can be a dick. Like I've got lots of people that hate me. Like it's like I'm much more offensive in real life than I am online. Like I'm much more like in people's faces in real life than online. Online, I'm much more careful with what I say, which says a lot. But it's all the negative responses from right wingers pretending to care and left wing woke scolds like essentially drove Lindsay Ellis to have some mental health problems, and she just needed to get out of a toxic environment, and so she quit. Which it's like to each her own. Like a lot of people can't deal with one person not liking them, and this is thousands of people, and I can understand that how rough it is. Like there was a time when my channel was trying to be canceled. And you definitely freak out because you think that the crowd is bigger than it is, and that they have more effect than they do. When in fact, most people are actually pretty loyal and love your stuff, and you could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and be fine. Okay, are you there? I'd have to add you. Hey there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Meow, meow, meow. Can you? So first off, you don't have hundreds of thousands of people who hate you. You have less than 100 guys who dislike you, and they're all fucking losers. Let's be clear on that. They're losers. I know they're losers, and they're lucky you don't call them out, because if they did, they'd be losing a lot of support. Let's just make that clear.
I imagine I must have thousands of people. I mean, in real life, I probably have a couple hundred of people that hate me. I'm just saying.
What did you do?
From my life, I'm an old man. I've picked up some enemies in my life. Hopefully, they probably just don't. They probably just don't think about me. But yeah, I'm figuring like I must have some people that dislike me in real life, and then I mean all of my ex girlfriends, like you know,
No, I just wanted to jump in for the Lindsay Ellis thing
my
because
parents, my siblings, like I don't know.
stop it. Like the Lindsay Ellis thing, I loved her Hobbit video essays. They were fantastic.
She has a lot of really really solid, great. I mean, she's a master of her craft.
Of course, but my problem with the Lindsay Ellis, if you don't mind me going a small tangent here, is I agree with her, like, stepping aside for mental health. You know, maybe, God forbid, she has, like, a disease or something, or a death in the family. But at the same time, like, the people ripping on her, she has over 1 million subscribers. I've counted how many people dislike you in the comment section of both our videos, and same with me. They're less than, like, 20 people, realistically.
Yeah.
Now, imagine her. Like, it's less than 500 people, and
Yeah.
out of 1 million subscribers, you're going to listen to 500 people instead of the millions of people telling you good job, loved it? Come on.
I agree.
Like,
I agree that it's mostly imagined. Like she believes that there is a larger group of people out there. I mean, you have to accept that like there's a large group of people in the world that believe that the best way to prove that they're moral is to criticize everybody else. And so there's all these woke scolds that you know, if I accuse everybody else of being racist, that proves I'm not racist. Well, guess what? You can criticize other people for being racist and be racist. Like it doesn't stop you from being racist, you know? Like but and so these people are just looking for someone to attack. Not to mention the right wingers pretending to care, you know, the kind of people that brought down James Gunn, you know.
I told you privately, like, I kind of don't feel bad for Lindsay because she did have a small hand in, like, you know, cultivating this mob mentality on Twitter with these people that do this. What do you call them? The woke
scolds? Yeah.
The woke scolds?
Woke scold is the name for the left wingers who just go on, who just like all they do is criticize everyone for not being moral enough, you know.
Gotcha.
For every little thing.
I know some asshole in the comment section would be like, well, Carmine, you know, that's very insensitive of you to say. Okay, sure, but if you want to talk about respect, let's talk about that for 1 second. And I'm going to use Preston as an example. In regards to Lindsay Ellis, she has over 9,000 people supporting her financially on Patreon. Don't those 9,000 people or her millions of subscribers on YouTube get a say in whether she quits or not? Because if she wants to take a break, that's cool, you know, worry about yourself. As content creators, we owe you guys nothing but good quality content. If Preston puts out, a fan earlier said he liked your Brienne video. If Preston puts out a video that's just not up to snuff, it's not up to quality that he normally puts out, that'd be a disservice to the fans who take time out of their day to listen to you and hang out with us. But I find it weird that less than 200 people get a say in what Lindsay does in her life rather than the 9,000 or millions of fans that she has.
Yeah.
And to top this off, you know, imagine if Preston decides he's quitting YouTube tomorrow because someone told him the Dornish master plan was lame. You'd be more upset at Preston for having such a brittle spirit.
Yeah. But, you know, it's, I can understand it. Like, but plus, you know, she has the right to retire. I think her writing career is doing better. You know, if she just said like, you know, I'm tired of this. I don't like the negative. It like reading the comment section is too much. It's rough. I don't like the negative feedback. I'd rather just focus on my writing career. I think that would be fine. But it's surprising because, you know, there's so many people that love her and there's so many people that support her. You know, that it's hard to not. I mean, I guess it's just the mentality. Like I say, some people can't stand that one person doesn't like them, and you try to tell them like, but 1,000 people love you. It's like, well, that one person like has the impact of 1,000, and for each of us, like negative definitely has larger impact than positive, but it's like about the ratio. Like, how many great Preston do I read to get over the one person that's like, you suck, you know? Like, I don't know. I think that ratio is different for different people. Yeah. Are there other A Song of Ice and Fire YouTubers you don't get along with, and what's the scene like? What up, Red Team?
I wouldn't answer that question if I were you.
I don't talk to many of them except for Carmine and Glitus. I've chatted with a few times. There is a community. I don't spend time in the community, so like I know abstractly some people are like, oh, it was hip among many to be like, oh, Preston is tinfoil. I don't listen to his stuff. But personality wise, I don't know any of them on a personal level. Like, I've met a handful of them once, and so I don't know any of them. Or if I'd get along with them, like, could I have a beer with them? I don't know, but it's it's also like feuds for, and imagined feuds from many, many years ago that are long, I think long forgotten among everyone, but
You know what's funny?
yeah.
The Ice and Fire community on YouTube, they all like, I'm tuned into this. I have my little birds. They all kind of hate each other, but
Yeah.
I was talking to Men of the West. I really want to get him on with you and me when Lord of the Rings comes out. He was telling me how all the Lord of the Ring YouTubers have this private Discord where they all come together and read like passages from the book, and they're all super close, like a fellowship. And I'm like, damn, that's so awesome and cool. We can never have that. Like that is not possible.
Yeah, I don't know what the fantasy hub. What is fantasy hub? Oh, Jugal, fantasy hub Daenerys' Storm. Mm-mm. I just see porn. I don't. Yeah, I don't.
Did he just troll you to Googling porn?
I mean, I don't know. I googled Daenerys Storm Fantasy Hub, and it was porn, and I was like, oh, I don't know what that was. Suppose Winds of Winter opens with a surprise new point of view. What would be the most stupidly hype? Mine's a random Dothraki with a baby napped Rhaego for no reason. That would be real. That would be an awesome one. Unfortunately, I think people already like asked and spoiled, and it's supposed to be a point of view surrounding Jane Westerling being transported back to the Casterly Rock. So a lot of people think it's going to be a guardsman or something, and then they're going to be attacked by the Brotherhood without banners or something, and everyone's going to be slaughtered or something like that. I think it would be incredible to be LR Deem, like at Eastwatch with the religious fanatics that disappeared from A Clash of Kings would be my like dream. But you're right that like a baby napped Rhaego, because we never saw Rhaego's body, and like we only have Miri Mazdor's word that Rhaego died. It's tough to say. I mean, because Jorah also is like shakes his head, and that Rhaego didn't make it. So either he didn't see the body or he's in on it as well. Like, which is possible. Who knows? Jorah's a shady character. Shady character. But Carmine, I was thinking about you as well because I
don't like that transition. Jorah, shady character. Hey Carmine, that transition.
This is back to like the ratio of positive to negative and what people can tolerate. Because like I noticed like every one of our podcasts, there's always somebody that's like, which is ridiculous because like, first of all, like Carmine's incredible, like on my podcast. There's a reason why we've been doing stuff for years together. One, like we've got a really good banter back and forth. I like him as a person. We've been doing this for years. Okay. It's great. It's a good formula. We're not, but some people are always like, Kip, why doesn't Preston do these alone? I hate Carmine. And I'm like, how can I do the podcast alone? I'd just be talking to a wall. But I just hope that you're not going to quit YouTube.
No, what the hell? I would never quit. In fact, something you don't understand about me that a lot of people realize about me very late in the game is that I'm very petty. In fact, I was actually going to talk to you about this. In the last Boba Fett thing we did, there was an asshole in the comments section who's like, Bresson, who the fuck cares about Book of Boba Fett? Go back to Ice and Fire. You know what? Fuck that guy. Every Boba Fett podcast we do is going to be on your fucking channel just to spite that. Fuck that guy. Fuck that guy.
Yeah. I mean, some people just really love the Ice and Fire content, but we've got other things going on in our lives. We got other, and by other things going on, I mean watching TV of different stuff. Let's see, 77-year storm. Still trying to find this supposed quote of there being other mention of Danny Storm. Does anyone have like a link? Fantasy have quote chat earlier. 77-year storm. I'm googling 77-year storm Daenerys. Again, I don't know if this is like from the app or what, but I just can't having a tough time. If anybody can link me to that, but again, I don't know if it comes from the app. I'm not too concerned about it.
Hey, real quick, you brought up this app
this is funny,
that people have to pay for.
This is funny. It's Preston doing voices alone on a podcast. So one of the reasons why I did weird voices on the old Thousand Worlds is because I had, I wanted to talk to somebody and have something throw ideas and stuff off of somebody. And I asked Carmine, I was like, hey, Carmine, you want to do this Thousand Worlds book club? And Carmine's like, dude, I'm not reading all these stories. Like, come on. Like, some of these things are hundreds of pages. Do you remember this, Carmine? Way, 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 way back in the day?
I don't know what he's talking about. He's making this up.
So I was like, we should do this Thousand Worlds. And you're like, no. So I sent you like one of the first stories, like the hero or something. And you're like, no. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm like, okay. So I did the first one with my wife, and my wife wasn't too into it. It was a little slow. It wasn't a fast back and forth banter, and so I was like, oh God, what do I do? And it's like, well, after that, I created these characters in order to talk back and forth to, because I had no one else to talk to. So, I mean, if I were to do my own podcast, it'd be me with those silly voices like on Thousand Worlds Book Club. But I'd asked Carmine way back in the day, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. It's too much reading.
I don't remember this. Really? This happened?
Yeah. I
mean, it was remember this.
Talking like what, six years ago?
Damn, dude. You know what's funny? We've been doing this, like someone pointed this out in the comments. We've been doing the podcast together longer than you and I have been doing YouTube solo.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, you started in 2014 like I did. So 2014, 2015, 2016. We started doing the podcast in 2017. So 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 5 years, homie. 5 years.
Yeah. It's funny to think about all these things. Like, I mean, we've been doing stuff like post show for longer than we were doing stuff alone, I think. Yeah. It was a different time. I was had my one bedroom apartment. I was unmarried when Carmine first called me. It was like, dude, what's going on? What's going on with your channel? Do you remember the Carmine cooking channel discussion? This was like years old. Somebody brought it up. I want the Carmine cooking channel. Do you remember that?
I deleted it because it got a little too big. It's just a little thing that I was just doing for a couple of friends. It got too big. I had to delete it.
You really did it?
Yeah, I'm not bullshitting about that. I love cooking.
I thought because you were talking about how like you like to cook, and you had this idea for a second channel. I didn't know that you actually put it into motion.
Yeah, of course I did. I like cooking, but it's a huge hassle. You have to get the camera, the lighting. It's a whole hassle. Like props to the OG cooking people like Food Wishes and all these guys. Props to them, but it's a huge hassle. Don't try it.
Man, I couldn't imagine doing something like that because it's just the amount of editing. Like, so when my son was born, I watched. You spend a lot of time when the baby's born on the couch, holding the baby, feeding it, waiting for the next time it's going to feed, and things like that. And so we watched a lot of TV, and so I watched all of the seasons of the Great British Bake Off. And reading the behind the scenes on that is amazing because it turns out they actually like it looks like things are happening over the course of a couple hours. It's actually filmed over 2 days, and they tell everybody to wear the same clothes 2 days in a row, and they cook everything twice, and they make it look like they're they're doing it once for like some competition. And you're like, oh my god, like the amount of film and the amount of editing together to try to make something entertaining in a cooking show. Oh god.
One of my most highly viewed videos was me teaching people how to make like rice the way I like it, because I like every individual grain of rice to be just I hate that sticky rice. So
yeah. You gotta wash that rice. Like you gotta wash the rice like 12 times.
I do. I make sure that water is like not even cloudy.
So it's the only thing like the only thing that like my wife is like, you need to do this because you do it better is like preparing the rice. Like it's the only thing. Because I don't know the way like I just have the estimation of the right amount of water for the rice cooker. Do you use a rice cooker?
No, I use a little like a little pan. The way all the Brazilians do it. A little pan. You put just a little hint of olive oil in there. A little lemon.
Oh, so it's a little bit risotto like.
Yeah. Basmati rice. You got to get the right basmati rice. It's like a whole process. It's a huge thing.
This is good information. See, we need to start the channel, man. We need to start the channel.
Why don't you do like cooking something like or try one of the Game of Thrones wines that came out or some of the beer?
I tried a few. People would give them to me as gifts a lot. Like they'd be like, "Oh, you're into Game of Thrones. Here's this Game of Thrones wine." And so I tried a few of them. Mm-hmm. And
you should record yourself trying them.
Near the end, they were all on sale, and so I bought a bunch of them and tried them all. I mean, the thing is like doing a wine tasting for wines that are no longer available. What are you gonna do? This is back on the Daenerys storm thing. The storm mentioned was a storm in 221, which Ross Tenby admits actually adds to the argument that there was no storm. Yeah. Is free will an illusion? Probably, but it's there's some interesting. There's some interesting ideas that you don't actually have free will, but you have something called free won't, maybe. So there's some biopsychology studies where you hook nodes up to your brain, and you tell a recipient like, okay, that you tell the test subject, all right, you're going to go left. You're going to choose either left or right, but don't and then do the joystick like immediately when you make that decision. Like don't think about it and then choose left or right. The minute you think left or right, do the joystick. And so people do that, and they find that up to 6 seconds before people hit the joystick for left and right, before the conscious mind has even come up with, I'm going to go right, I'm going to go left, the subconscious mind has already made the decision. And so this idea that you have free will is largely an illusion, because by the time your conscious mind actually sitting there saying like, I am choosing X, I'm choosing Y, your subconscious mind has already made that decision. However, there's discussions of whether or not you can make a decision and then stop that decision. And so like your subconscious mind is making a whole bunch of calculations, but then your conscious mind is coming in and stopping bad decisions, second guessing yourself. And so there's this concept that perhaps we may not have free will, but we might have free won't. Like the entire point of the conscious mind, because what is the point of the conscious mind? Like we don't have any idea why we should have a conscious mind that's sitting here in a in this sense, like we are here now, and phenomenologically, when you say phenomenologically, you mean like it's a psychology term for or philosophy term for the phenomenon of existing right now. Phenomenologically, like why do we have consciousness? Well, we don't know, but there's this idea that maybe we have free won't to stop ourselves from making bad decisions. Hey. From Cody, Boutreau, Boutreau, I fall asleep to your voice every night. This is a compliment. Thank you very much, Cody. More for my ASMR channel. Thank you, Hakum, and listen to the voices until the silly RX come home. It's funny because when I first started the Thousand Worlds podcast, and when I first started season 5 watch was my first Chad Summerchild thing. Some people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cringe," and then people kind of got into the flow, and we're like, "No, I get it. It's like so cringe that it's awesome." So, all right. How do you feel about the changes of many characters from book to show? Why would they change the races? We're talking about House of the Dragon, or are we talking about Game of Thrones? I think so. Generally speaking, when we're talking about TV, it's just a fact of life that people watch shows with their own racial demographic in it. You can try to say, no, I loved hanging with Mr. Cooper or whatever. But when it comes down to it, like there are exceptions to the rule. Like, oh, I had a Michael Jordan poster on my wall, or I idolized Will Smith. It's like, sure, these anecdotes are true, but the general trend is that people are really interested in shows that portray people that look like themselves. That's just the way things are. My wife, for example, is always interested in what shows are coming out that are featuring, Chinese Americans. Like people like to see themselves represented on TV. Life imitates art, art imitates life, that kind of cycle. So when you want to improve ratings for a show, one, thing you can do that's no effort is try to create a more diverse cast, because then people are going to watch. And this is why forever they always talked about the token black character, but the token black character worked. They wouldn't have kept doing it if it wasn't actually successful in producing more viewers. So you have to accept that, like, okay, TV's just going to do that. It's what's profitable. I mean, what's accurate would be everybody with really crappy teeth who are really short and but non-famous actors that you don't recognize, because when you're watching something, why would you recognize the actors, and have all the association from a previous show? So, I mean, no one ever says, "Oh, Sean Bean, like what a horrible choice for Game of Thrones." Well, the thing is, when you're choosing Sean Bean, you're biasing yourself because you're thinking about Lord of the Rings, So there's all sorts of things, and why don't these people have screwed up teeth? Well, they're actors, So we have to accept that there's going to be a certain amount of changes that people do to make something profitable. So creating a diverse cast is just always going to be there. Now, do I think some of these changes are important or warranted, or do they change the story significantly? Like, does changing Salvador Sound from a Valyrian to being a black guy change the story very much? I mean, if you believe in like various conspiracies about Valyrian restoration or something, that maybe you could make some sort of argument that it's really important that Salvador Sand be Valyrian with white hair and pale skin. I don't know. Is it important that the Carthene are super pale? It's hard to say because the story isn't over yet. But Game of Thrones, Salvador Sand played a relatively minor role. It didn't matter what race he was, so we can shift it around. Now, with regard to House of the Dragon, it's a bit weirder. And I admit that like one of the running themes about Valyrians is that they're kind of Nazis, right? Like they believe in the purity of their race and them being the master race and stuff like that. So I admit that it's a little weirder to have black Valyrians, because the Valyrians were really interested in their racial purity. Now, maybe they can just limit racial purity to hair. I don't know. But I understand why they do it. I don't necessarily think it's a huge deal. Like, will a major theme of the show be like the Nazi aspects of Targaryen culture, Valyrian culture? I don't know. So I guess you just kind of have to wait and see how the whole thing goes. Because pushing Alicent Hightower, for example, on the Targaryens, like, on the one hand, that doesn't seem that unreasonable. But if you knew their Nazi background and how like marrying outside of their master race is kind of a big deal, it does kind of change the perspective of things. I mean, I don't think it's a huge deal. I don't necessarily think that like removing this aspect of the Targaryens being a bunch of Nazis like changes the story too much in the grand scheme of things. So you're having a show. Plus, like when the show was first announced, I sort of said, "Well, God, this is going to be visually uninteresting. Everybody's going to have blonde hair, white hair, and pale skin. Targaryens." Like, they all look the same. That's going to be really uninteresting. I actually, when I first heard the show was going to be about the Dance of the Dragons, that was something like I thought about. And so I think maybe in a visual sense, it's, having a more diverse cast, more recognizable is perhaps a good thing. And yeah, there's certain costs to it, but I don't necessarily think it's a huge deal. But why would they change the race? They changed the race to make it look more interesting and to have a bigger audience. That's pretty simple. The costs, yeah, you're changing George's vision a little bit, but is it significant? I don't know. I mean, how significant is it that the Valyrians are Nazis? I don't know. We need to preserve Preston's brain. It's not our subconscious mind's decision to make. You have to choose. It's your decision to make. Yeah, well, it's hard to say. There's some discussion about like why evolutionarily, like, did we gain free will, or at least the illusion of free will? And I think there might have been a survey or something on like people that believe in free will earn more money than people that don't believe in free will. So like it might be that if you believe it, even though free will is an illusion, if you believe in that illusion, you're more motivated. And so it might be beneficial to believe in free will. Not that you can really necessarily control your beliefs. Like, there's that old thing like, oh, you might as well accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior because, if you don't, you'll go to hell. But there's no loss to believe, to accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And it's like, great, but it's not like I can control myself and be like, oh yeah, no, I totally buy it. Like, what you believe is not necessarily, which is an odd thing. What you believe is not necessarily a conscious decision, or it's, do you think the interregnum concept with all the underdrawn dwellings will come into A Song of Ice and Fire or somewhat? If Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring would ever be written, I definitely think that there would be a reveal about the true nature of Westeros and all of the underground dwellings. And I definitely, think that the underground dwellings are from something like the Long Night, some sort of apocalypse. I think that it's interesting. Do you guys watch? If you guys been watching Wheel of Time, Wheel of Time revealed themselves to be post-apocalyptic. I'm not sure if that was the book or not, but it was the first thing I thought of when they showed it. They did a flashback to the past. Everyone's wearing modern clothes, and there's like spaceships flying around in the sky outside, and you're like, oh, post-apocalyptic, interregnum fantasy world building its way back up to modernity. Like, oh, like right there, Game of Thrones. Like, I don't know if that was in Wheel of Time. Like, I've only read the first book, so I don't know if that's something. But I don't know if anybody else was watching Wheel of Time and thought that same thing. But man, that was certainly going through my head. I was like, oh my gosh, it's just like Ice and Fire. It's just but they would have to be these underground dwellings. Like, come on. I mean, they're just everywhere, and they keep appearing in more and more books. I mean, I don't know. Let's see what else we got. We love the voices. Sweet Robin, Optimist, Chad, Fanboy, Cynical Brandon. Yeah, well, they'll be back. I think Westworld, whenever Westworld comes out, maybe. Oh God, that's gonna be great. Yeah, Carmine, you hang up? Yeah, I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here. I'm just letting you do your thing and play my game.
I was just saying that, like, you getting excited for Westworld?
Not really. That's this final season. I think it's the final season. It better be fire, because
no, it's not going to be fire. It's going to be horrible. You know that. You know that. But I think it's going to be out before House of the Dragon.
Yes.
I don't know. There's this list of anticipated shows. Did you see this, Carmine? The list of anticipated shows.
Is it an article?
IMDb listed their top returning shows and top original shows. House of the Dragon is the number one anticipated new show for 2022.
Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
Here it is. House of the Dragon, Lord of the Rings. House of the Dragon tops Lord of the Rings. I don't know. Sandman. Yeah. I forgot about Sandman.
It's hard to believe.
She-Hulk.
I think that's hard to believe that. I don't know. People are really excited about this Lord of the Rings show.
Well, there might be an announcement tomorrow, because tomorrow, January 3rd, is Tolkien's birthday.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I would find it really fucking awesome if tomorrow George announces Winds of Winter release.
tries to take the wind out of its sail.
Yeah.
Oh God, my I wish. But I don't think so.
Or just drops a sample chapter just to be an asshole. Just there you go.
Yeah. Oh God, I would love a sample chapter. There hasn't been a sample chapter in a long time. Not since Elaine came out. Jeez. And somebody asked him if he was going to drop any more sample chapters, and he said, "Well, there's got to be actual material for the book, so I can't go and release more sample chapters." Of course, really, it was like, well, I don't have anything else written, so how can I release any more sample chapters? He could easily release Forsaken or something, which was never officially released, or something like that, or something he's already read, like Tyrion 1 or Barristan 2 or something like that he's read before. So I mean, he could do something like that because he's read those before. But or Victorian, full Victorian or something. Um, which Witcher show? I've got a. What was the original here? Trying to find what was the original question here. Oh, how do you feel about this was about Witcher, the changes of races. Carmine, um, are there some because I haven't read the Witcher books. Um,
I was actually debating about this with someone else. You really should, because I will say I'm probably going to butcher the author's name, Sapowski. For much of an asshole that he is, and we'll get to that in the future, he knows how to write women fairly well, fairly decently, on the level that George does, and so it's up your alley, the
hmm,
Witcher stuff. As for changing of the skin tones of certain characters and whatnot,
yeah.
that's the least of the Netflix's adaptations problems, to be honest. And I will say this: I'm more of a fan of how they look in the book, because one example is you saw the first season, right?
I did. I yeah. I watched first season.
So remember Triss Marigold? You know who Triss is, right? Triss Marigold. She has kind of like frizzy hair, kind of.
I think so. I mean, describe her role in the show.
she's the king. She's the king of Temeria's like court mage.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
So in the video game adaptations, she's actually a white woman with red hair. In the books, she has like chestnut hair. I kind of like how they did her look in the games much better, because it's supposed to contrast Yennefer's raven black hair, and I like that more. So in regards to looks, I like the games like feel and look better than I do the books and how they do things. But we'll get to Witcher.
Okay. So
We'll get to it.
I mean, is it an important aspect of the plot, like the
Like
different
House of
hair
the
colors
Dragon.
and
Not really. Not really. It's just because you were talking about it briefly. In regards to them doing like minority representation, personally, I
yeah.
don't care. But I know in the black community, a buddy of mine was telling me about this. It's a point of contention because they whenever Hollywood wants to do racial diversity, they always hire light skinned black people, which makes black people with darker skin tones a bit annoyed, because
Yeah.
they don't get as much love and representation in there as well. So,
Yeah. That was actually the I don't know if you ever read Black Like Me in school, but Black Like Me is about this guy in the '60s who takes a bunch of tanning pills, and he's from Texas, and he does
wait, he's a white guy that goes around and like to see like how he would be treated differently if he had a different skin tone.
yeah.
I heard about it. Didn't he get death threats after the whole thing came out?
He did. What's funny about the book and his experience is he essentially takes a bunch of tanning pills, and he does a trip across the South, and he doesn't actually experience any like much racism while he's a black person. Um, he's mainly like hanging in the black community, and he does write mostly about how he noticed there was just this huge divide between light skin and dark skin. And then he also noticed, like, when he got to big cities and he did things like ask directions, he found that people were like overly polite or something to overcut to compensate and stuff like that. Anyway, he finishes and he goes back to Texas, and then he gets, after he releases the book and becomes kind of famous, he then starts getting death threats and stuff from the Klan, and then he dies of skin cancer related to the treatment that he did.
Jesus,
Yeah.
that is. By the way, real quick,
Yeah.
so there's a Game of Thrones app you have to pay for.
There was, yeah, there is, yeah. And it's just like it's kind of like the online encyclopedia, but it has like some more information or something. And so, you know, so it's been around. I don't know how many people actually have subscribed to it. Yeah, but it has like a few spoilers here and there, or a little bit of information here and there about more. And so like fans would debate like the accuracy of it a lot because they'd get into these huge debates and say, well, the app says this, and people were like, whatever, the text of the book says this. And you're like, okay, well, which do you go with? Well, the text of the book, you know. Yeah. Even Carmine didn't know this.
Why the hell would you, like, there's so much free material out there where you can go and see, like, what's going on. Why would you even pay for it? Whatever. People are just douchebags.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants their cash grab, right? As I take super chats. Yeah. My theory, The Winds of Winter is so delayed because George R. R. Martin is still punishing us for wondering on his health 15 odds years ago and is not a blog post. I mean, I wish it were something like that, but no. The guy is just he's so distracted and he has so much writer's block. Somebody posted something the other day that I kind of agreed with, that the more when he's actually on good progress, he writes about his good progress, and when he has like when he's not doing well, he doesn't post many updates at all. And so he hasn't really posted many updates at all on the book. So I think it's going very poorly. I would be very surprised if we get an announcement in 2022, or if ever. I think I made the statement that if we don't get an announcement by the end of 2022, I'm going to give up on ever thinking that The Winds of Winter is coming out. So
there was a joke someone in my Discord made about if the Jets don't win this year, that means another year, no Winds of Winter, just to punish us. Winter.
It's true. It's true. This is funny. In post-apocalyptic society, maybe their teeth have evolved. It's true that maybe, you know, they have more resilient, straighter teeth in the Game of Thrones universe, and it's just also just everybody's a lot hotter, you know, more muscular. Where are we? I'm way behind here on comments. Would you put money on who would you put on money on coming out as victors of the Frey Civil War? Big Walder. If Big Walder survives, so keep in mind, Big Walder is riding into battle right now against Stannis' army. Like that's where we last leave Big Walder. And so like a lot of people talk about like, oh, Big Walder has all these plans. He's a really smart kid. Well, if he's so smart, why is he riding into war? And we know he's riding into war because in A Clash of Kings, this is George R. R. Martin's detail. Like in A Clash of Kings, there is a single passage that describes Big Walder's armor. And he's got essentially this helmet with a Frey like castle on the front of it. And in the ASoIaF fragment, like that's the fragment that we saw on George's computer screen when he was on the John Oliver show. It's not many sentences. It's like 5 sentences, but one of them is about the leader of the army has this Frey thing on his helmet. Now, clearly, ASoIaF is mistaken and thinks that Big Walder is leading the army rather than Hosteen Frey. But Big Walder is Hosteen's squire, essentially. So Hosteen got sent off into war. He pulled his squire with him. His squire is Big Walder. So Big Walder's riding into battle. So it's going to be tough. I mean, maybe he'll be captured, and maybe he'll survive as you know, some sort of captive. I mean, he's a Frey. He's a highborn. He's a valuable captive. But you know, there's a really good chance that Big Walder is going to be killed in battle. I mean, he's on the front lines of battle. I mean, that's not very smart. But he's also a little kid. I mean, people are like, oh, he's so smart. He's going to do something savvy. He's a kid. He's a little kid. You know, he might. You know, it's gonna be a bloody situation. So we'll see if he survives. But it's one of the neater things that this random throwaway line from A Clash of Kings, and then the ASoIaF fragment like coming out. And there's a lot of parallels as well, because Big Walder, this I talked about this a little bit in I guess when I did a review of the Asha fragment, but and the Barristan chapters, is that Barristan is of course Barristan the Bold, and he's nicknamed Barristan the Bold because he was a little kid who dressed in large armor before he went into a tourney. And so he is riding into battle with a dragon helmet with these dragon wings on the side that are probably going to get in his way, because he purposely said earlier in a Dance with Dragons that it wasn't a very practical helmet and it restricted his vision, but he was wearing it because he wanted to honor Dany or make reference to the fact that he's Daenerys' man and he's fighting for the dragon and stuff like that. So like there's so many parallels of like Barristan is this old man riding into battle with this like dragon helmet, and Big Walder is riding into battle with this like Frey Twins of the Crossing helmet. And that, Barristan was a 10-year-old boy when he was given the name Barristan the Bold, and Big Walder is a 10-year-old boy, and all these sorts of connections. So these two characters riding into battle at the same time at the Battles of Ice and Fire. But, we'll see if Big Walder survives. But as for who's going to victors of the Frey Civil War, it's hard to say. I think there's going to be a lot of death. I mean, I guess we kind of think about Olivar and the Rosby Freys do pretty well. Maybe the Krakells. I think in the short term, the Krakells seem well suited. But it all depends. I mean, I guess if the Krakells are siding with the Lannisters, it depends. It depends what the Krakells do. But we've been hearing about all these Krakell characters popping up, so we'll see. And of course, like I have to go back and look at which ones, which Freys are being fostered in the Vale. I think there's a Sandor Frey or something there. George supposedly said House Dane's words are a spoiler, but speculation is that our dawn brings light. Considering prophecy is probably BS. What do you think about these words and Lightbringer? That is correct. That's a good question. People ask me a lot about House Dane, and like George R. R. Martin has like purposely given us nothing about House Dane, and who they are, and who knows if he's even written it. But I mean, I guess like it's the idea that somehow the Sword of the Morning is going to make it up in this final fight, and needs to be the sword that like kills the Night King or something like that. Dawn brings light would be something that sounds about right of what it would be. But I mean, it'd be funny if it's a real spoiler. Like House Dane's words are, Ashara Dane is Jon Snow's mother. What? Those are crazy house words. House Dane's words are, there was a nuclear apocalypse and we've regressed to medieval times. What? Those are really interesting words. No one knows what they mean. No one knows what the word nuclear means. But for some reason, nuclear holocaust. There was a nuclear holocaust is House Dane's words. But I mean, I guess the boring answer is that it's going to be some sort of sword that's going to be used in the final battle. But that all doesn't sound like George R. R. Martin. That doesn't sound like Ice and Fire, does it? Like that sounds like Wheel of Time or something. But it might as well be what the Aes Sedai believe Rand will do or something. It doesn't. You're right that it doesn't sound right. I mean, maybe it's like maybe it's another setup. Like this is what's going to happen, and then a subversion. But if it's not George R. R. Martin's decision to write it, it's not his choice. It's true. Well, I mean, I guess he maybe his lack of writing is his free won't. So maybe he's making the choice not to do something. I mean, the existentialists would say even when we don't make a choice, we are making a choice. So in fact, that might actually be the more correct thing. Um, uh, Big Walder is a killer. I don't know. I would argue no, but it'd be really stupid of Big Walder to be Little Walder's killer. I'm just saying Little Walder is much bigger. Like, why would you try to kill that kid? Like, he Little Walder like muscled Big Walder around constantly, knocked him off when they played Lord of the Crossing, knocked him off the horse when they did jousting. Like Little Walder, I mean, unless Big Walder really wants to be Ramsay's squire, but he was Hostine's and got sent off to war. Whatever he did, it was if his big plan, if he had some sort of big plan, it worked out really bad for him because he's in the middle of a battle. He just rode 3 days through the snow to fight Stannis. So Big Walder is a dumbass if he's the killer. And he could have figured that out if he's so smart, right? I've not read Stormlight Archive, but everybody's been pushing it so much that now I'm going to feel obligated that I'm going to have to do it because I get asked this all the time, and I'm just like, oh no, again. What was so important about dragons crossing the wall that made it? Um, it's funny for there was a so on this issue of whether dragons can cross the wall. Um, I made a passing theory that perhaps like magic or telepathy or whatever doesn't cross the wall. And part of this is just that in a Dance with Dragons when they go through when Bran and company goes through the wall, Jojen all of a sudden changes personalities completely. And so there's this question of why does he go from being this wise old man to a scared little boy the minute they pass through the wall? Is the wall blocking something? Maybe somebody was telepathically manipulating Jojen on one side and they can't telepathically manipulate him on the other side or something. And then there's this question of what caused Orell's eagle to burst into flames when Varamir's Sixskin was inside him. And so some people are just like, well, we're led to believe in A Storm of Swords by Jon that because this eagle burst into flames, that somehow Melisandre did that Melisandre can cause eagles to burst into flames. But the problem is that when we're in Melisandre's head, she's a hack, right? She's a charlatan, and she uses powders, and when she reads the flames, she's making stuff up, and she sees stuff in the flames, but she doesn't really know what it means, and she can't, she makes the flames dance by using powders. So she's a bit of a fraud. So if Melisandre didn't cause Orell's eagle to explode into flames, what did? And so I kind of theorized that maybe the eagle crossed the barrier of the wall and telepathically like couldn't be there and exploded or something. And so there's this question of if there's a telepathic link to a dragon, could a dragon actually cross a wall, or is there some sort of like telepathic link that would prevent that? And so if they do cross in Fire and Blood, that would say, well, there's no telepathic link, or there's nothing to prevent somebody, or there's an exception to this rule. But this is one of the things I was thinking about, is whether or not the wall has some sort of telepathic connection or some sort of barrier to magic. And so I guess it's, maybe in that sense it's important that dragons are able to cross the wall. So it might have something to do with that. I have to reread that section to see exactly what it says actually. Um, Victorian's fleet fit to meet a king in battle. He lost to a storm. Is raiding the east coast. Ariana 1. Euron is fainting. Gonna take Storm's End. Kraken's left behind. Red Wine fleet. Well, the question is where's the rest of Euron's fleet? Euron himself is absolutely positively in the Red Wine Straits. Like, we know this from Aeron's point of view, from the Forsaken chapter. So Euron is absolutely there. However, he only has a few dozen longships when he supposedly has 1,000 ships. And so I theorized that he was going to pull a Fair Isle on being Fair Isled. Like, he's in the middle of the Straits. The Hightower fleet and the Red Wine fleet are closing in on him. They're doing a Fair Isle, which they evoke Fair Isle so much leading up to this battle that it's hard not to think about Fair Isle, like being taken from both sides in a strait and being destroyed. So why would Euron do such an incredibly stupid plan? My theory is that Euron and the Hightowers and the Red Wines are going to come in, and then more of Euron's ships are going to come in around them. And so they're going to do a double Fair Isle, essentially. He's putting himself in a Fair Isle situation, and then he's going to double Fair Isle them. And I believe he's going to chum the waters with blood and have Krakens come up and kill everybody inside the Straits, and it'll be great. Now, this is the idea that in fact, he there's a distraction in the Red Wine Straits, and in fact, he's sending his fleet up to Storm's End, which would be, well, it would be tough. One, like, I guess he'd have to ride, be further from the coast and not run into the Red Wine fleet, which would be tough because at least a few ships are going to be, a fleet that size, a few ships are going to be blown off course on both sides, both Red Wine fleet and Greyjoy fleet, and they're going to run into each other. At least a couple ships. I couldn't imagine two huge fleets sailing past each other. But as well, like, Euron would need some sort of plan to get him out of his precarious situation in the Red Wine Straits. Like, he is in the middle of a battle. And we know definitively that he's there. So he'd have to come up with some, escape plan from that. I mean, maybe he's going to do the chum the water stuff while the rest of his fleet is somewhere else. But, I don't think there's any advantage to him doing it simultaneously. Like, he could wait for the Krakens to destroy the Red Wine fleet and then send his ships east. There would not necessarily need to be a simultaneous attack. Plus, if you're going to do an attack, why not take King's Landing? I don't know why you'd take Storm's End. The John Con is doing it to rally banners. Like, Storm's End is a symbol because of the real king. Euron could take Storm's End and everyone would be like, "Fuck you. We don't care. We're still not following you. You're the Greyjoys." So, I mean, if he were going to do a feint, he would attack King's Landing, I think. But I don't think. I think the feint is he's doing a double Fair Isle. Okay. Way behind on comments. Way behind. The Fair Isle Gambit. Yeah, essentially. How many babies will be conceived from couples who met during a Preston live stream? Has anyone met during Preston live stream? Is there any dating out there? My audience is pretty overwhelmingly male. So, if you're meeting the ladies, you're lucky. There's my analytics I don't know if let's see if I can bring some stuff up. There's some interesting stuff with the analytics.
Careful with bringing that stuff
I
up.
know, because you don't want like sensitive information. Yeah.
Yeah, so the
Yeah,
audience
yeah,
at this
fair
point
enough.
hates me because I always try to like prevent you from doing certain things, but it's yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Um, is time traveling brand controlling cold hands? Um, trying to think. Trying to think. Cold hands is like what he was really like. Like Bloodraven was expecting Bran, and Bloodraven doesn't necessarily call um, Bloodraven the Three-Eyed Crow. So we don't really know who Cold Hands could be controlled by, but the implication is Bloodraven on first read. Now, Bloodraven, Cold Hands shows up at the right moment to save Sam, while a bunch of ravens are attacking some whites, then brings them to the night fort at the exact same moment that Bran is crossing through, in order to allowing them to open the gate and get them through, and bring Bran. It's exceptional timing, and so somebody's coordinating it. Whether Bloodraven is doing it or whether time traveling Bran is doing it, yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I have to put more thought into this. Because I've been focusing on some other things. I've been focusing on Hodor. The next video is all about Hodor, so I've been focusing all of my time on thinking about Hodor and time traveling Bran. But it's worth thinking about how much Bloodraven is controlling. Bloodraven must be really surprised. Like he must be really surprised. Like if they, because I imagine there's a previous iteration of the timeline where Bran isn't thrown from the tower or something and doesn't have Hodor to help him go north. And what time did he arrive to see Bloodraven? A year later? Many years later? Did he ever go to Bloodraven? There has to be a previous iteration of the timeline before time traveling Bran at least screwed up Hodor. Bends one's mind to think about the time travel and like the alternate possibilities. Sweet Robin Hodored 1-1. He swung his doll by a leg against the tower. 1-1 did the exact same thing, like a doll with Sir Patrick. There's definitely a literary parallel between Sweet Robin and what's going on with 1-1. Absolutely. But the question of whether Sweet Robin actually did it, I don't know. I mean, Sweet Robin doesn't necessarily like wine. 1-1 loves his wine. Sweet Robin's smarter than 1-1. One would think, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a literary parallel. He's definitely, throwing around his doll just because, Sweet Robin pretends to be a giant and goes around crushing Winterfell and swinging around his doll. And 1-1 is swinging around a person like a doll and he's a giant. Like definitely a parallel. But whether it actually means that Sweet Robin was in 1-1's brain, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's more of a question of if anybody's trying to take over Sweet Robin's brain versus if Sweet Robin has the ability to take over other people's brains. I mean, he probably does if he has the ability to skin change, but is he as powerful as Bran? I don't know. Has George even planned it out? Like, there's something weird going on with Sweet Robin. Like, he sits on a weirwood throne. He hears voices at night. He seems to know a lot more than he's supposed to know. It's hard to say. Hard to say. Oh, I got rid of myself. New camera overlay. Here we go. Grow myself up again. Yeah. What if Euron got carte blanche at the House of Black and White with his egg and picked a face and put on Hodor and killed the Squiddy King? As much as people have the theory based on the Ghost of High Heart's like vision that Euron that somehow traded his egg for a faceless man, I don't know how timing wise he would have been able to do it. He was definitely in Slaver's Bay and was watching Dany like in Slaver's Bay, with the Unsullied and that transaction. Like we hear about them saying that the Corsair King was here, and he comes back and he tells everybody that, oh, she's in Slaver's Bay. And keep in mind that like at the time, everybody thought that she was going to buy her army and go, but he knew that she was staying in Slaver's Bay long enough to sail all the way back. So you'd think he was hearing stuff all the way up until her deciding to stay in Marine and rule. Not to mention, we know he picks up the warlocks before that, so he's somewhere between Karth and Slaver's Bay before that. So the amount of time it takes to sail all the way back to in a Storm of Swords to have Euron, to have Balon die, like, because he arrives like a week after Balon dies, so, or a day after Balon dies. So does he have enough time to sail all the way up to the House of Black and White and Bravos and then all the way back down? I don't think he does have that time. It's a super, super tight schedule already. Like, you kind of, when you read A Storm of Swords, you have to accept that Dany's adventures happen within the course of just a few weeks, and that the rest of A Storm of Swords is happening after the Dany chapters. That the Dany chapters are all up front. That she's just going boom, 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 conquer, 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 Marine. And you're like, okay, so she's conquered. So the Dany story, you take it out, you read it first, and then you read the rest of A Storm of Swords. And then you get to the Euron stuff. Does he have time to go up and get that egg? I don't know. I mean, it seems to be like fandom canon that he traded a dragon egg for a faceless man. But I just don't see how he can like logistically hire the faceless man, which is why I kind of always said it was really the Jason Mallister that was killing Balon or something. Somebody else. I mean, I doubt it'll ever be explored or resolved, but it's funny. Anyway, long explanation on that. Thank you, Herd Instinct. Do you plan on doing a video about George's original Song of Ice and Fire plan? Yeah, have you noticed that Jaime from that plan becomes Cersei in the book? I should do a video sometime at least talking about it. There are a lot of interesting aspects of it. Because for example, there's no Sansa in the original Ice and Fire plan, which is interesting because Sansa's huge. She's a mirror character to Arya, and so they literally split her, that character, in two, and gave some plots to Sansa and some to Arya, and made the two characters parallel as well, with Sansa being girly girl and Arya being tomboy. I should do something. It's pretty interesting to go through it. Tyrion's not a dwarf. All sorts of things, and on that there's just weirdness, because I've seen George. They've asked George in interviews, like, when was the first time you thought of the character of Tyrion? And he's like, oh, it's from Windhaven. in a first draft, I had a dwarf king in Windhaven. And if you read Windhaven, like these minor characters, like who is the ruler of some fief, doesn't get any play. Like there are a handful of main characters, and they're the main characters throughout the whole thing, you know. Um, and so the idea that he would have put much time into developing the personality of this dwarf character is not likely. Now, he does put that time in when he does Under Siege, and it's very clear that the real inspiration for Tyrion is Under Siege. You have a dwarf character without a nose who plays chess, who's a drunkard, who's upset about women, and feels entitled even though his life sucks. It's very clearly him. So but at the same time, like, he had this Tyrion character who is not a dwarf, who is in the original plan. And so at what point did he decide to take that Tyrion and make him the dwarf from Under Siege? I don't know, because you'd think those would go together. Like, he's going to have the person, like, the physical body type and the personality from Under Siege both come together when he brings them over and makes him into the Tyrion character. But he clearly had a plan for Tyrion, a non-dwarf Tyrion beforehand. I just wonder if he was also a drunkard chess player who was angry about women.
Is this the original story where Robb fights Joffrey on the field?
No. This is so George has this like library down in Texas where they keep all of his notes and his other writings and stuff. It's got everything. And somebody just like went into the library one day and like checked stuff out. Like, and he was just surprised that they just let a random do this, make an appointment and do this. And he checked out, he found like George R. R. Martin's original proposal to his editor. So when you propose a book to an editor, you have essentially a really short one pager that describes the plot and says, "This is my book. This is my idea. Let's do it." It's a little longer than a page. It's like a page and a half. But he describes his plan for the series, and part of it is redacted because somebody went through and was like, "Oh, we better not spoil anything," and redacted some stuff. But like, for the most part, he just kind of has this like description of the plot, and it's a little different. It's kind of funny. Like, originally there was a John Arya romance.
Yeah, I did a video on it, and then Dany, I think she takes vengeance against Khal Drogo for killing her brother, so she runs into a cave with the dragon eggs.
Yeah.
I remember doing a video on this. It was very weird. I think Joffrey or Tyrion fought Robb, and Tyrion was also in love with Arya, and then he sets fire to Winterfell. So
yeah, and I think the big thing that people take from it, and I think the most important thing, is that originally there was a plan for 3 books. The first book being The War of the Five Kings, the second book being Daenerys' invasion, and the third book being The Invasion of the Others. And he describes that as the structure of the story, which is rather funny because we aren't even to like part 2 of that plan. Like, that's not. Dany hasn't even invaded. The second Dance of the Dragons hasn't happened. So it's rather funny. But yeah, I should do something on that. It's pretty interesting to get into. Thank you, Dave G. Do you think Cold Hands is a skin changer living a second life as a white? That's an interesting question. Zombies are a really dumb concept to start with. Like, in a science fiction kind of sense, because like, obviously, like, if a body is dead, like, the electric synapses are not happening, nothing's animating. It's really quite stupid. But George R. R. Martin has written sci-fi stories with zombies, Night Flyers being one of them. or all the Corpse Handler trilogies as well. But the question is, could you skin change a dead body and cause it to animate? I mean, there seems to be some of that with what the others are doing. Like the others seem to control the whites in a kind of hive mind fashion. So they seem to be kind of skin changing the whites themselves. Like Verimir Six Skins is able to control 6 beings at once. And so the white, it could be that an other is capable of controlling in his hive mind skin changing sense. So I guess it's possible to animate in a skin changing sense bodies, and then the question is whether or not one could have a second life in a white. I mean, if you're going to assume the first, that you can telepathically control corpses, which is stupid, but yes, we've already seen it happen. I would say that you'd have to think that it would be possible to do the latter, but it would be, it's weird. But then again, everybody's thinking that's going to happen with John, right? That John's going to be brought back, that John is going to be housing his consciousness into Ghost and then somehow go back into his body as a white. But I don't know. Same thing with the I'm getting all scatterbrained here. So they always call it a second life. And I imagine this idea is that if, say you're Verimir Six Skins and you die and you live a second life into a wolf, why can't you live a third life? And I imagine the idea is that the wolf itself doesn't have the genetic ability to be a green seer or whatever, or a skin changer. And so you can't move on from there. So if John goes into Ghost, how does he go back into his dead body if he's living a second life in Ghost? How can he live a third life back into his corpse body? I don't know, or does it count? Like, oh, it's your original body again. You're just returning back. But I don't know. We haven't seen anyone live a second life in a body in a human body yet. It's done in Under Siege. Tyrion lives a second life in a body. So, I mean, I could see it being possible, but then again, we see people like Cold Hands is not dissimilar to Lady Stoneheart and Beric Dondarrion. So I don't necessarily think it's narratively necessary. Like, yes, it's absolutely possible, but I don't think it's narratively necessary because Cold Hands seems to be very similar to Lady Stoneheart and Beric Dondarrion, like a reanimated person. But never say never. I would say it's possible. When Three-Eyed Crow showed Bran the Heart of Winter, he cried because there was nothing, no others, no magic. Now you know. For magic's sake, it's hard to say. So what Nono is talking about is in Bran 3, the Three-Eyed Crow takes Bran past this white barrier at the end of the world. It's not the wall because they already crossed the wall, and then they make it to a shimmering white barrier at the end of the world, and they go through the barrier, and then they say, and Bran cries, and his tears burn, and he says, "Now you know why you must live." Does even George know it's there, like the real secret, behind everything? And why hasn't Bran thought of it again? It's kind of silly that Bran would never think about what he saw beyond that curtain. Especially when later in A Clash of Kings, like they're at Tumbledown Tower and they're like, "Oh, Bran, like, should we continue on? It's your choice." And he's like, "Oh, if I stay, I'll be crippled." And so the reason Bran goes north is because he wants to walk. He never thinks for a moment like, "Oh, the reason I should go north is to save the fucking world." Like, it's so inconsistent. Like, he's shown at the beginning of the book that like he needs to save the world somehow, and then he never thinks about it ever again. And it's just like, no, I just want to walk. I just want to walk. No others, no magic. Who knows? I mean, I don't know why Bran would be so into magic existing. Um, I don't know. I mean, supposedly it's some answer on why there's uneven seasons and things like this and the apocalypse or something. Maybe he gets a vision of the apocalypse. I don't know, but um, I don't know about magic for magic's sake. Thoughts on time traveling Bran actually being Dream's nightmares, tricked into thinking he caused Hodor's affliction. Well, that's it. That's an interesting concept because obviously George R. R. Martin writes a lot about um, visions being fake and being tricks. The Harangan Mind's main strategy in the Double War is fake visions to people. Um, so yeah, no, I mean it's an interesting concept. I think originally my original theory on everything was that the children of the forest were like the Harangan Minds, and they were tricking humanity into going to war with itself, so that they would kill themselves off, so the children of the forest could rule. This was my, I'd read all the Thousand Worlds stuff. It's the plot of and Seven Times Never Killed Man and stuff like that. And though I do think that tricks are definitely part of the story, once I kind of accepted time traveling Bran as being a real character that's in the story, I think I shifted to at least the things from time traveling Bran being. I mean, they could be still tricks into trying to get Bran to do stuff, but into some sort of save the world time travel story, which is what I'm working on with time traveling Bran. But originally for many years I held the opinion that no, the children of the forest are evil. They're tricking humanity and trying to kill themselves. But time traveling Bran just throws a wrench in that idea, and so I think I've shifted from the Harangan Mind kind of aspect to time traveling Bran. Yeah. Do you have a favorite theory that you didn't come up with yourself? Quentin is alive was probably Quentin is alive is probably my favorite theory that I didn't come up with myself. Like when I too read the book and was like, oh man, that's really depressing that Quentin died. And then when I went online and people were like, no, he's totally alive. I was like, really? Wow. Like, and then started going through it and I was like, wow, there's a lot of evidence that Quentin is alive. That's a really great theory. And so that's definitely my favorite. Because I think it rests. I was depressed and about Quentin being dead, and there's hope that he's alive. Maybe he's dead, maybe he's alive. I don't think George made a decision. I think he just purposely was not writing himself into a corner. But I think Quentin is alive is pretty great. There's some other good ones. I think the Maester's controlling everything. I really like. I think that makes the story much more interesting. I didn't really think about it until I started reading about people's theories. Lemon Gates, I didn't come up with that. That was, the house with the door not being in Bravos is great stuff. I didn't come up with that. I guess I've been the champion of it, that everyone associates me with it, but I didn't.
Who was the original guy? Is it Cantius?
No. Lemon Gate is something that people have been noticing even in when A Feast for Crows came out. I read a really old message board message when Feast for Crows came out, and it wasn't even based on the lemons. It was Sam looking for wood, and everyone's like, wait a minute, there's no wood. There's no wood. And so it was first based on the fact that there's no wood. But really, like, the wood thing wood's expensive, but you can come up with wood. It's lemon trees. And so it was definitely noticed by fans, like from the beginning, like a long way back, that the weather in Bravos doesn't fit with Danny's description. So I can't remember like who exactly it was. It was just kind of random users who are probably not even in the theorizing anymore. But once that's sort of pointed out, you're like, oh man, no, that's definitely a thing. Yeah. I don't know if like some of these things, like who was the first one to come up with various stuff. Brand Voss gets a lot of attention for just being one of the first theorizers, and so like the Maester conspiracy, I would say like I really he was perhaps the first person I read that came up with that. Very Grand Northern Conspiracy kind of stuff, conspiracies in the North, that was Brand Voss kind of stuff. So he was one of the older theorizers. He had a bright and brief time as a Song of Ice and Fire theorizer, and then decided he didn't like doing it. He did it for like a year, and then wrote a blog, an incredible blog, and then moved on. But no, Cantu specifically is mainly focused on the North, north of the Wall and Winterfell and that kind of stuff. So I don't know who, if we could find, originally was the first person to notice that lemon trees don't grow in Bravos. Somebody was first. What if Branskin changed the Mystery Knight to be the Knight of the Day, then Rhaegar, then Crown Lyanna for fun? So I don't know if it's time traveling Bran. I do question whether there's a previous iteration time traveler that's doing that sort of stuff. But time traveling Bran himself, you got to remember that like he can't do stuff without preventing his own birth, right? So, Bran's, and I'll talk about this in the next video, but Bran's birth is really quite delicate. Like Arya is born in 289, and there's the Greyjoy Rebellion, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. And so Bran is conceived like in the middle of 289, like pretty much right after Arya's born. It's not very realistic, but she's born, and Ned jumps right in on like Catelyn's not even healed. She's not even healed from birth, and he jumps right back in and gets her pregnant, like right after, in order to get Bran in there. And then probably runs off to go fight in the Greyjoy Rebellion. So it's really delicate timing. And so if you mess with anything, like say you scramble Aerys's brain or whatever, well that affects like when Rickard Stark comes down, and that affects like Brandon, like Brandon, Ned's brother, like coming down and dying, which changes Catelyn from marrying Brandon to marrying Ned. So, there's a lot of things that happen to that make Bran come into existence. And then there's a lot of things that you can do to stop Bran from coming into existence. And so it might be a previous iteration time traveler that caused Bran to come into existence. But if we accept that there's a time traveling Bran doesn't want to stop his own birth. So, but we'll get into that. I don't want to spoil too much with the next time traveling Bran series. But this is the thing about time travel. Now when everybody's talking about causal loops, you don't have to worry about it. But like causal loop, I don't think a causal loop is going on. I can't. Have you ever smoked cigarettes? I have, but I haven't smoked a cigarette in a good 20 years. I smoked some in college. But I'm just losing my voice here because I'm talking straight for 2 hours. But no, I never really smoked much. I smoked a few cigarettes in college. I was never addicted. And it's been over 20 years since I smoked.
Speaking of smoking cigarettes, people were asking, when is your book coming out?
Gotta start writing again. It's a new year, New Year's resolution. All right, Dirk from Dying of the Light point of view, still looking for Gwen. I think Dirk is dead. It's how you see the end of Dying of the Light, but he goes up against Breton, Breton Braith at the end, and I think Breton Braith is probably gonna kill him. Which is it's a really beautiful ending. Dying of the Light. I'm not saying Dying of the Light is a great book all the way through. There's a lot of irrelevant, stupid stuff, but Dying of the Light, like George R. R. Martin has like really incredible endings, and Dying of the Light is a beautiful, beautiful ending. I don't know. So, Carmine, did you ever read Dying of the Light? Too long? So in Dying of the Light, they're on this planet. It's this festival planet that is no longer used, and it's moving away from the suns, and so it's slowly losing all of its heat, and all the wildlife on the planet's dying. And so it was a temporary festival, but there are these people that are still on it, like trying to live like this old, super conservative life from their society. And in their society, they don't have enough women, so same-sex marriage is kind of a thing, or more or less. They have a different name for it, but more or less same-sex marriage is a thing. And so these super butch married dudes are going around trying to continue hunting. And they're like doing the world's most dangerous game, trying to hunt humans. And so they start hunting the main character. And at the beginning of the story, the protagonist meets a guy who looks just like the Hound. Half of his face is burned. And he insults him, and everybody thinks that like, oh, and he's getting chased by this guy the entire story. And the entire story, you're thinking, oh, he insulted him because the guy's trying to get honor back, or he's trying to get, it's based on the society or whatever. And he finally agrees to be in a battle for the death in the end. And he's like, yeah, why are we doing this? And the guy's like, because you killed my partner. Like, and I loved him, like he loved me despite the fact that I had an ugly face. And he's like, oh. And he's like, okay. And it's this really like unexpected, because the whole story, you're just like, you're told so much about their culture, and you're told all of these things about their culture, and you're like, oh, this is the reason Breton Braith is chasing him, for these cultural reasons, because he's like so bound to his culture. And then you find out in the end, no, he's chasing after him because he killed his husband, and he loved his husband because his husband like loved him even though he had half his face burned off. And you're like, oh, it's kind of sweet, it's really like he didn't care about all these other people that were hunting him. He's like, no, like who were hunting him for cultural reasons. It was, but the main character's probably dead, though it's left on a cliffhanger. You don't know what happens. But where could be a timeline shelter? I think, but we'll discuss this again, but like how many time trips do you get? Like in my last time traveling Bran video, kind of, in George R. R. Martin's previous stories, you can't really change time unless you stay in the past. Like people can visit the past, but you have to really stay in the past in order to have a persistent change to the timeline. So I kind of think the time traveling Bran has killed himself in the future and is in the past. And the question is can he time travel again? I don't know. Maybe it's a second life and he can only do it once. I don't know. But you're right. Like if he could time travel infinite times, why even bring in Bran? Like why train Bran in time travel if he can just time travel infinite times? If time traveling Bran is here and he can time travel infinite times, like what's the point of training regular Bran? I imagine you train regular Bran as like the backup plan. Like he keeps the loop going. That, time traveling Bran goes back in time, trains regular Bran, who goes into the future, who goes back in time to train regular Bran, to go forward in time, to go back in time to train regular Bran, and so on. Like that's the way I kind of see it going. But if it were just a time traveler that could continue time traveling forever and make changes willy nilly, like what's the point of regular Bran? Like you can do anything you want. He's got to be limited. He's got to need Bran for a reason. Uh, what house is the best sigil? It's like asking what's the best Pokemon. Um,
You know the answer to that. Come on.
I actually think Loudred is. I mean,
Wait, you know Loudred? How do you know these?
well, I can play Pokemon Go because Whismer, like
Oh
I think the
yeah.
best Pokemons are the ones where like you can see um, the previous unevolved Pokemon in it, and it's like transformed in a clever way. Like I think those are the best Pokemon. Like with Whismer, you can see how Whismer opens up to become Loudred, and it's like a flower opening up. It's quite clever. While then there's other ones where you're just like, well, they don't look anything like that. But hold on just a second. I'm gonna leave people. Hey there. Okay. Okay. Yeah, just keep Thank you. Okay, sorry. Okay, where are we here? I wish I had an answer for best sigil. What's coming? Carmine, what you got?
Uh, hmm. I think House Morrigan has a pretty cool one. Wait, no. Who's the one that I really liked? I was just playing Crusader Kings as them a while ago.
Yeah.
Oh fuck! I have to go back to the map and look at it. But there's this one house in the Reach that has a really good one. Their overlord is House. Oh fuck! Who's
House
Salisa's
Morgan? House
house?
Morgan's just a flying bird.
I know it's cool looking, Preston. Who's the Salisa's house? Is who? It's the fox. Who are they again? I forgot their names.
Florent.
Florent. The one I'm talking about is in a Reach. Their overlord of House Florent. Fuck, I forgot. What
Tyrells?
no, the Tyrells
Tyrells
own
are
the Florent.
overlords of House Florent.
Yeah, but these guys are the House Florent is the overlords of them. I forgot their name.
Okay.
I forgot their name. I think the dude was like a Kingsguard at one point. I forgot their name. I'll get back to it.
Yeah.
You get it? You put it up? Aw.
For a second. What was I thinking? That's the thing is you're kind of influenced as well by like characters you like, and so you kind of like their
It's a cool sigil.
you know like like I always kind of like Justin Massey's sigil. This is
The
even
Whirlpool?
though there's nothing to it, but I just I always kind of liked it. That's that because I like Justin Massey, and so but it's
Wow, that's
it's
gonna
tough.
bug me. Oh, Norcross. Norcross is cool.
Let's go. Let's see. Oh yeah. I see what you're saying. I mean, that's the thing is it's simple and yet like bold, right?
Yeah, Norcross is like super. I like Norcross. Who else? Whenever I play Crusader Kings, and you got to play it, you got to stream yourself playing it. Whenever I play Crusader Kings, I like playing as the Boltons. I don't know. It's just fun playing as the Boltons.
Yeah.
Who else? A lot of really cool sigils in the Reach. Grandison, I think, is in the Stormlands. They're pretty cool. They're basically like what, a sleeping black lion, I think it is. Grandison.
Oh yeah.
Theirs is pretty cool. Oh, I have to. I'm so glad you brought this up. I have to show you this. So there's this mod for Crusader Kings' Game of Thrones mod. It's a sub mod.
Yeah.
And if you play as like Rob during the War of Five Kings, you have this option to find all of Robert's 12 bastards. It's like Pokemon for Robert's bastards. It's crazy. And
What?
there
Okay.
you have to see this. So let me send this to you on
Does it
Facebook.
go with the idea that there are 16 bastards or something, or?
There? I think there are 12. Funny
Okay.
enough, I
Well, I
actually
mean,
went through.
it's based on, how many bastards Robert has is based on like bullshit. I mean, it's based on Maggie the Frog like throwing out a number. Like we have no idea how many bastards Robert has. Could be more, could be less. No clue.
Well, I believe in the game, it's like 12 or 13. I actually went and found them all. And the really cool thing the submod does is it gives them all each their own stag sigil correlating where what they're from. So, for example, you on Facebook?
Huh? Yeah, yeah.
Put this up. This is Maya Stone sigil. So if you're Rob and you find these bastards or anybody else and you find these bastards, you can just like announce them to the world and somewhat legitimize them. They get their own house and their sigil. So Maya Stones is a stag, and the stag's horns are a crescent moon for the veil with stars around it.
That's pretty nice.
That is,
Yeah,
I love it. There's another one here. My favorite is here.
yeah.
I'll show you some of the
That's
bastard
cute. Yeah.
sigils. There's one in the Reach called Warfield, and his is like the Baratheon warhammer on a field of green. Stuff like that. And Gendry's is Bullheart. His is just like a bull with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stag. And you have Bella Stone Bell. It's two stags and a like giant bell between them. It's super cool. So
Yeah,
sorry, I get really into this stuff. Like I love these little things.
this is, oh, I see. Okay. This I could never, it's a good way to make me lose years is to introduce me this. But yeah, that is pretty neat. That okay, they could do the Stone Bell, Warfield. That's pretty neat. They do. There's so much detail and time put into Crusader Kings.
There is.
It's amazing that I mean, it's a fun game, like mechanics wise. Outside of it, or is it, or you just is it just so fun to be in in all the detail that the game has?
Both. By the way, the creators of Crusader Kings, they actually hit me up privately. I don't know if you remember this, to ask
Yeah,
you if it'd be okay to put House Summerchild in the
yeah, yeah,
game, and the house is actually in the game. You guys can play as House Summerchild. It's
yeah. And
it's
I
all a
remember
thing.
like Chad is also a character or something in the Veil and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty neat, pretty nice of him. Yeah. Let's see. I just have a few things here. Okay, catching up. Thank you for your hard work. You inspired me to read books. Read some of the Thousand Worlds. Meat House Man has too much corpse sex in it. That's does have a lot of. I mean, it's a whole story about corpse sex. It's I mean, in my opinion, one of his best stories. How many times have you read the books? Uh, I mean, I don't know, a few dozen, a couple dozen, I imagine. But it's like in different pieces. Like some chapters are going to be more than others. For instance, I'm really high on the number of times I've read Brienne now, having done the Brienne stuff. Um, what's this? Preston's in trouble. Oh, this might be when I had to leave for a second. Um, what do you think of the theory that Theon's sausage was never come out, cut off? It's Yeah, I mean, it's never said explicitly, but Theon does mention that he can't really perform um, anymore. So um, now, not that it's necessary, like story wise, not that it's really necessary for him to have a penis anymore, because he does have, of course, a potential bastard. Like you have his first chapter in A Clash of Kings with the fisherman or the captain's daughter, and then that captain appears again in A Storm of Swords, and he says he's gonna head down to Old Town. So if you want to throw another freaking thing that's going on in Old Town besides Euron and Sam and Faceless Men and Maester conspiracies and Aeron and Brave Companions and Ario Hota and Darkstar being close by, you also have a potential Theon bastard, like down in Old Town. So much stuff, man. Just leave John dead and just do the rest of the story on Old Town. I'd be happy. You with me, Carmine? Leave John dead.
Who's gonna take the Central Point story in the north with the wildlings?
Melisandre.
Does she really care too much about the wildlings though to have that move
Asha.
forward?
Asha. Or, I mean, you're right that there's no character that likes the wildlings anymore, right? Like, so liking the wildlings, like, George R. R. Martin was clearly trying to make this, like, you know, square peg fit a round hole, right? So he spends time with wildlings and he has sex with Egret, and all of a sudden he's just a lover of their culture and wants to save all of them. And he just sees them as people. Like it's a pretty fast transformation. Granted, he's a young guy. Young children are impressionable. Young people are impressionable. But he needed this character who like wanted to protect the wildlings, and it's a little rushed. There's not really much where there's not much time that John is really sitting around appreciating wildling culture, other than having arguments with Egret over whether or not, you know, rape is good, which, you know, like it's his sudden love for them is a bit weird in A Dance with Dragons, but you know, it's fine. You got to do what you can. But you're right that like if you took out John, what point of view character would care about the wildlings? Nobody. No, I mean, Asha doesn't care about the wildlings. Theon doesn't care about the wildlings. Melisandre doesn't care about the wildlings. Davos doesn't care about the wildlings. So it's so I'll grant Carmine that you're right, that from a leader of the wildlings protector, king of the wildlings point of view, king beyond the wall kind of stuff, you kind of need John.
Unless he's willing to introduce another point of view character with like one of the other wildlings, maybe Tormund. I don't know, but we need somebody in there.
Or if Mance made it, because Mance seemed kind of unbound to Melisandre when he made it down to Winterfell. But I guess if Mance was still the tool of Melisandre, but that would be a loss. But I don't know. It's not many wildlings left. I mean, I guess there's all of the Weepers ones, so I guess there's 100,000 wildlings left. But I don't know. Fair point. I just think there's too many points of view, and you need to cut a few, and I think cutting John would be such a time save, such a space saver. So
we discussed this briefly before, but it's a darn shame that we don't get enough of the quote unquote evil characters' point of view. Like we never got anything with Joffrey or Ramsay, like seeing things from their perspective. Like the characters were just awful people.
Yeah. I mean, he could go. What I guess it's why I kind of like A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons is that as time goes on, you get more points of view from very flawed characters. In fact, it kind of makes, in my opinion, our traditional points of view more boring. Like all of a sudden, when you have a character as nuts as Aeron, as batshit insane as Cersei, as flawed as Jon Con, as flawed as Ariana, like when you have these characters, going back to Sansa or Jon or even Dany is a bit underwhelming. It's like you gave us such interesting, vivid points of view of these insane people, and you want us to go back to Joe Blow attitude of Jon Snow. Yeah, but man, did you ever read Fever Dream? Yeah, I read Fever Dream a few times actually. Might tie into the bolt-on theory. There is Fever Dream definitely inspired much of A Dance with Dragons, and especially the feelings you get around Ramsay Bolton and House Bolton in in A Dance with Dragons. I mean, it's like scenes almost lifted. Not it's not word for word, but it's like the whole vibe of a scene. The prepping of Jane Poole is the same as the prepping of the victim at their ball where they're dressing her up at the beginning of Fever Dream and things like this. I might have talked this on a previous live stream. But the interesting thing about Fever Dream is that they're not really vampires, like they're called vampires and they drink blood, but they're not vampires in the sense that they don't bite other vampires to create more vampires, though they don't like mirrors and sunlight and all of that. So it's somebody was saying every vampire lore always begins with the idea of like, it's not like in the movies. Our vampires are different. They sparkle in the sunshine, Oh, that's what real vampires do. Every vampire story has to turn the vampire tale on its head and make vampires different. No one can have a traditional vampire. Oh well. Let's see. Where are we now? Let's see. 1:15. Is Carmine, you gonna stick around for a spicy politics discussion?
You still want to do politics, man?
Oh, I'm just saying we're in overtime. We've already been doing this 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Oh boy, politics. Oh my god. Oh. That's up to you, homie. If you want to deal with those people, because they smell blood in the water and they'll come. I always find it funny how
I did miss a chat that said can't wait for the Weeper to come south and take over the north. That's what should happen, right? Like we quickly like we spent all of this time like debating who's going to win, Stannis or Ramsay, and thinking about the houses and how they all relate to each other. And then the Weeper comes in and just kills everybody, and it doesn't matter. Which, besides the Weeper, like you could easily start the Winds of Winter with Stannis winning this incredible battle, and then all of a sudden the others come in out of Gorn's way and kill everybody, and you're like, whoa, like that could easily just happen, which is very George R. R. Martin, right? Like we spent like the Battle of the Blackwater, is you spent all this time wondering, oh, who's going to win, like Tyrion versus Stannis, and what's going to happen, and then in the end, the Tyrells just sweep in. Doesn't matter. Like you were caring about all this stuff on the ground, it doesn't matter. The Tyrells are just sweeping in. So I just want to talk about, somebody said, I just want to talk about non-political Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones has no politics in it. There's one thing George R. R. Martin never does is allegory. Oh, he does not somebody else. Let's see here. What do you think about states hoarding welfare money while people struggle? It all depends what you define as welfare. So welfare is really people have this idea in America that and this is born from like Ronald Reagan talking about welfare queens like way back in the day. That somehow like it's really easy to get on the government teat and you're just handed checks, like that's somehow a thing in America. It might be a thing in some other European countries, but definitely not America. Like unless you're like an underage, unless you're disabled or you're like an underage mother of like 5, you're not getting any checks. So there's a program called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which is traditional welfare, and it's incredibly small. Like I think let me look up actually like how much temporary assistance for needy families actually gets. It's everybody's like, oh, the welfare state. TANF is temporary assistance for needy families. and it's, let me see how many. Come on, give me a figure. Give me a figure. Annual budget 17 billion. So $17 billion. That's, I mean, 17 billion seems like a lot of money. It's nothing, but it's that's how much we give to, you know, probably single moms, and then you've got like, some people say, okay, well then you've got like food stamps on top of that. And you're like, okay, well there's food stamps. Okay, that's another few, but it's not that much, you know. When you think about like other things that we give to people that are like Social Security, which you'll never get cut. That's free. That's free money to people. That's the largest part of our budget, but that'll never be cut because the elderly are 30% of the voting population. So, but when people say like, oh, the people living off of the government, and they, you know, you think of these welfare queens. That's just kind of a myth in America. Like the amount of yeah, and that's the thing is, TANF is really hard to get. It's really hard to get. And a lot of times to get some of these things like unemployment, you have to continually like show that you're trying to find work and that you've applied for work, and it's like a job in itself. Um, and so, you know, what is welfare? I mean, is corporate welfare welfare? Is Social Security welfare welfare? That's the thing, is welfare is ill-defined. Like when we say welfare, some people think temporary assistance for needy family, but what is it? Like the Constitution says that, you know, the point of the country is to increase general welfare, but it's just it's hard to say. Um, but yeah, are there needy people in America? Absolutely, and we need to do more to help them out. And you know, I would say you know, my simple solution is just, you know, have higher taxes on the rich and kind of have a earned income tax credit larger on the on for the lower class, and it's pretty good. I mean, I would probably be for minimum income, but I don't think it's politically feasible. Like earned income tax credit and expanding that is more politically feasible, but um, you know, so what, you know, but the various states. That's I have to learn more about if there was like federal funding that was sent to states that they could withhold. Um, but we'll see. We'll see. It's not your decision to make. It's not your decision to make. You're right. It's it's um it's Tyrion's. It's Tyrion's decision. It's um. Let's see. Biden won because the Democratic Party has paid support corporatists. I mean, everybody is a corporatist in American politics. It's just which corporations, right? Most corporations give equally to both Democrats and Republicans. But then, you know, is the word corporatist, or even is a corporation a bad thing? We have to philosophically like ask those questions. Because when people say something like corporate, like you've got this negative connotation, but corporation is, you know, just a group of people. So, like you'd like to think that it's like, oh, a bunch of evil businessmen in New York City, like stealing all of the money. Well, that's part of it, but corporations are just, you know, a lot of people. You know, fundamental problem with the world might be us. It's nice to have an enemy. It's nice to have this clear enemy, but the enemy is probably ourselves. And so the real problem is like, you know, like figuring out how to change all of humanity at once, you know. So it's yeah. But yeah, I mean, generally, I think my general opinion is that, you know, the way to go is to vote Democrat, try to get more progressive ideas in. I have a very clear ending. I want America to be more Scandinavian, and that's it. Speculative trading be illegal. This is interesting. I kind of think yes. I think it's gambling. I think it creates bubbles that are dangerous for society that the government sometimes has to bail out. Which that's so I would say that yeah, it's so it got there. So again, like early, very at the very beginning of the stream, I mentioned that if you look at economics, like and who wins the Nobel Prize, you get a pretty good history of where the science has gone. And so originally, like for a while, the neoclassicists reigned. Robert Lucas and the Chicago School and everything. And the appeal of the neoclassicists is that they had all of the math behind them. So, and they had some great models and you could do stuff. It's one thing to be like, economist and talk about like general theory and then you go into a room and you say, oh, well, we should probably give some money to stimulate something. And somebody's like, well, how much effect is it going to have? And you're like, well, I can't really quantify it. Well, the neoclassicists were really good at creating models and creating numbers and having everything be quantifiable and throwing out numbers. But there was a lot of huge assumptions to start with this. So there's this idea of how much is like, what is the value of something? Like theoretically, like what is the value of something? And it's funny because it's kind of relatable to who are we as people? Like a lot of people say like, oh, do you have courage? Well, I can feel I can have courage, but I only know I have courage if I've done an action and then after the fact, it shows that like I did it and therefore I had the courage and I proved it. Even though like you have a feeling of courage you can't really prove you have courage until you do an action. Well, it's the same kind of thing with value of a product. You can feel something has a value, but we don't know its value until you sell it on the market, right? So like, I can feel my comic book collection is worth $5,000, but if no one's willing to buy it and it isn't bought, and even if somebody says, oh, I'm willing to pay $1,000 for it, saying you're willing to pay for it is a lot different than actually paying for it and having the transaction go through. And then once it's sold, I know the true value, $275, So speculative trading is funny because a lot of people, it's the reverse. It's like, well, things are being sold and they're being legitimately sold for these prices. So does it actually, a neoclassicist would say it actually has that value. There's no such thing as a bubble. So, if something sells, if some cryptocurrency sells for whatever, it must really have that value to somebody. But I think most of us kind of understand that this is why the new economics is all behavioral. It's all psychological, gets into this. And it's like, well, no, there's human psychology in all of this. So, I believe that you're preying on psychology. It's harmful to the masses because the government has to bail people out. But yeah, I would definitely have speculative trading be illegal. Now, I have to go back because I don't want to miss stuff. Why do people vote against their own self-interests? I guess they're just not aware that the self-interests are happening. I mean, I'd say people are irrational, but people end up voting for cultural things. And the Republican Party and right-wingers are very good at changing the subject. Like, they're very good at being like, okay, the Republicans, they're stealing all the money. They're horrible on the environment. They're horrible on women's rights. They're all of these things that most of the population like agrees with the Democratic platform. But then the Republicans all of a sudden be like, oh, but critical race theory. And you're like, what? And then all of a sudden everybody goes out and votes based on some random piece of crap like that doesn't make any sense. And this happens every election cycle. Like you can go back, Dukakis versus Bush, and Dukakis is killing it. He's killing it. And then Bush is like, flag burning amendment. And you're like, oh my God. Like if any of you are old enough to remember, like flag burning amendment was like the thing. And it like Bush dunked on Dukakis over whether or not there should be a flag burning amendment. And you're like, oh my God. Like, and so Bush ended up winning, you know, like these little things like that, like Hillary's emails. Who cares? Like, one, like, no, Hillary didn't do anything really that bad. Not that any other person did, like any other Secretary of State did before, but like, you know, having their own server. But all of a sudden it's like, takes over the conversation. And so I think people are myopic. They care about what's in their immediate thinking. And it's really hard for them to think about these big abstract concepts. One thing as a Fed and as an auditor, because my job is essentially to go in and try to make things more efficient and have the government spend less money. The first thing people would always say to me is like, oh, like those $500 toilet seats. This was a famous thing. Like the DoD years ago was paying for $500 toilet seats for these jet fighters. You know, where and everyone's like, oh my gosh, what a waste. Like we're paying for $500 toilet seats. And it's so funny because it's like, if it were about $500 toilet seats, that'd be the least of our worries. Like the reason the $500 toilet seats were in that situation is because they had to make custom toilet seats that were small enough to fit in like jets, you know, like that was the reason the toilet seats were $500. But it's like, if the government spends $500 on a few toilet seats, that's nothing. The problem is when you're spending like billions of dollars on Joint Strike Fighters, because no one knows what a Joint Strike Fighter should cost. I can go to Home Depot and know that a toilet seat should cost $20, but I have no frame of reference for a Joint Strike Fighter. This gets into something called catch-up economics, actually. If you go to the grocery store, like, and you ask somebody, how much should ketchup cost? Well, we don't know how much ketchup should cost. The only way I know how much ketchup should cost is by going to the grocery store and seeing that, oh, Heinz is 5 cents more than Hunt's, and Hunt's sucks, and Hunt's is 10 cents more than generic, and that really sucks. Am I willing to pay 15 more cents for Heinz? I guess so. Like that's you're doing your value and price all based on comparison. So we're really bad at determining the value of things. Like we can't really determine how much a house should cost except by how much the neighbor's house costs, how much the neighborhood, you know? Am I really sitting there going, oh, this house is $1 million. Do I value it 1,000,000 times more than 1,000,000 99-cent cheeseburgers at McDonald's? No one's doing that calculation. But I think it's the same thing with like their interests in life. And like there's so many influences that are right there in the moment and what their friends are doing and what's being culturally done in their community and stuff like that. Like this instantaneous belief that like Hillary's unlikable. Well, in my group of friends, Hillary's not unlikable, but other people just, oh, Hillary's unlikable. Well, it just became this group think. Hillary's unlikable. Well, okay. Like, and you know, you get into these like social movements. Well, why is that the general belief? I don't know, you know, and how do you shift it? Republicans are really good at just shifting the conversation to just talk about irrelevant stuff, and people vote on that. Like the fact that like I have so many internet debates about whether or not cancel culture is like a significant thing, and it's like, and then they're like, oh, because the Democrats are all about cancel culture, and it's like, what does cancel culture have to do with the government? It has nothing to do with the government. All of a sudden, like right wingers have like latched a complete cultural thing, or like watching Fox News and talking about how the Democrats want to cancel Christmas, or there's a war on Christmas. It's like you could vote for all Republicans all the time. You're never gonna like. How's that going to affect Christmas? Like that has nothing to do with the state. It has nothing to do with what the government does. The government supplies you Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and produces a military and builds roads. It doesn't determine whether or not somebody's saying happy holidays to somebody, like, and so it's tough. It's tough. But I think people vote their own self-interest because of just psychological reasons, like, and thinking about the here and now and what their friends are doing, and they're not really doing the long economic idea of what would make their life better. Had to pause a bit behind. Would Melisandre care about the wildlings with control of Mance Rayder? She would just think of them as bodies. Like they're just bodies to her. They're all bodies in the war with the Lord of Light. She doesn't really care about people by themselves. Talk bubbles to me. Doing my best. I think bubbles exist, but like I say, the neoclassicist would say that bubbles don't exist. But like I say, like the history of economics is you kind of had classical economics, then you had Keynesian economics, then the neoclassicists kind of came in. There was some stuff in between there, the monetarists, but then the neoclassicists came in, and then the neo-Keynesians integrated neoclassical economics with Keynesian thought. Most of the government is working on a neo-Keynesian understanding of the world, but hip in the academic surrounding is all behavioral stuff. And so that's some really, really interesting stuff about that.
I actually wanted your opinion on this. So, sure. Love him or hate him, Bill Maher was on one of the Cuomo guys, the one that worked for, I think, CNN. They were doing an interview, and Cuomo asked Bill Maher why he thinks a lot of these places vote against their own interests. And Bill Maher, I think, made a great point. Nobody wants to vote for a snobby douche. A lot of like the Democrats can come off very snobby and very like, they have like this nose in the air towards people who live out in the sticks and stuff, and nobody wants to vote against that. And his whole thing in general was they would rather vote against their own interests because they hate Democrats more than they do themselves, in a sense.
There's something to be said about people defining their identity mainly based on what they're against rather than what they're for. Like, for instance, I'm much more an anti-Republican than I am a Democrat, but like almost everything that the Republican Party stands for, I am for the exact opposite. Like, so
exactly the same. Why these people vote against their own interests. Exactly. Yeah. Democrats are trying to do better in these states, and they hate the Democrats more than they are conservatives.
Now, the question is it is true that they say localized accents don't help you in anything except for politics, and that George Bush played up his accent, and, for a while they said, for president, you always needed a Southerner Democrat because he's got to have that good old boy attitude to win over the rednecks, to make, and then the Northerners are gonna vote for him anyway, and that's the way to get a Democrat in office. And so this was the sort of Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton idea, is that you've got the Southern Democrat. He's a good old boy. Jimmy Carter had a peanut farm, and therefore he's going to understand everybody. Bill Clinton, he's a good old boy. He's a Bubba from Little Rock, Arkansas. And that somehow that's going to help. And I think that works with some people. Do Democrats come off as snobs? Like, it's hard to say. I mean, they're gonna like I say, it's less about how Democrats act, and it's more about how Republicans frame them. Like I say, the Republicans are incredibly good at framing their opponent. And it's regardless of what they do. Like, there's always something that they're going to do. Like John Kerry ran for president. He was a freaking war hero. He had Purple Hearts. He spent years in Vietnam. Like, okay, this is what and they framed him as like a wuss. Like, oh, he was lying about all of these things, and oh, poor little John Kerry. He only got a Purple Heart because he was shot in the butt. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Have you been shot in the butt? A bullet like shot you in the butt, and it could have been a couple inches somewhere else and killed you, shot your spine. Like it was an inch away from his spine, and you're saying that he's a wuss because he was only shot in the butt. You know, like this is really the attitude. And they reframed John Kerry as this wuss, despite the fact that he was in the military and was wounded and fought in Vietnam, you know, wounded in action. So it's tough, you know, like I don't necessarily know like how much it is the Democrats putting it upon themselves and acting snobby. Because, you know, the Republicans are, it's not like they're not just as snobby. Like it's not, you know, like you think, you know, Trump would ever hang with any of the people that follow him.
Like, oh, this is something like I've had to explain to a lot of fucking people. No, he would never be called like that.
Bush, you know, it's this hilarity though of like W putting on that accent and being like, oh, I'm from Texas. I'm just like you. I'm just like you. I could have a beer with that guy because he's just like me. Oh, if like my dad were a millionaire and was ambassador to China and the head of the CIA and vice president of the United States and president of the United States. Like, yeah, I suppose he'd be just like me if that were my background, you know? And I went to Yale and like, yeah, no, he's just like me. You know, like they're so able to package that. And, you know, somehow Trump did. I mean, Trump, born into inherited $400 million, never really worked a day in his life except failing at business. And yet he's an everyman. He's an everyday man, you know, having sex with porn stars without condoms. And yet he's a good Christian. Like how it's like a miracle. I wish I knew how they're able to do it, how they're able to frame like up as down and down as up. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And, you know, Democrats aren't able to do it, you know?
They actually tried doing this a while ago. I'm reading this article here. All 90 senators present, minus Senator Mike Rounds, voted to pass Senator Tommy Tuberville's Republican Alabama amendment to withhold federal funds from local authorities to defund their police. So the Republicans were trying to get like the Democrats in that moment of gotcha. Yeah, see, yeah. I knew you were trying to defund the police, but they didn't fall for it. But so you're right, yeah. But it's like you said, people, you know, they're more anti this than they are voting for things that are beneficial to them.
Yeah. It's very cultural, which is a funny thing because government doesn't really have any effect over your culture, you know. So, what's my opinion of the military budget? I think the military budget's too big, obviously. But it's not as cuttable as one thinks because military is mostly salaries and pensions. You know, the stuff that you're really looking to cut that's up that one could cut because it's really difficult to get rid of people and you can't and all these retirements and stuff like this. Keep in mind, if you're in DoD, you can retire after 20 years and you receive pension for the rest of your life. And a lot of people are on that, and that's you're not able to undo that. They're promised that. So the things that that are kind of easy cuts that are harder to get that I think would be good is just shutting down a lot of bases around America. Of course, it's really tough because the senators and representatives from those states will fight you tooth and nail. Like, oh, you want to shut down my base in Kansas? Like, why are people marching around a base in Kansas? Like, who are they scared that, you know, that Oklahoma is going to invade? You know, like what's the point? You know, we have a lot of bases that can be shut down and save money. But the problem is that's people see that as an immediate loss of jobs and economy in their state. So people don't do that. That's the thing is the military, you got to remember that the military is mostly welfare, like in the sense it's creating jobs, it's creating, you know, it's putting money into local economies. Like it is that. There's a lot of like research and development and weapons and stuff like that. That's stuff that can probably be cut quite a bit. There's a lot of weaponry we don't need. You know, we have to ask ourselves, like, how many subs do we really need? How much Air Force do we really need? How many jet fighters do we really need? a lot of that can be cut. I mean, we do crazy things like send jets into the middle of hurricanes and stuff for some reason. I no idea, but I think you can find it. It's harder than you think to cut the budget. Like it'd be great if you just like, oh, cut the budget 25%. Oh, that's not gonna work. You gotta go through with a scalpel and cut the little pieces because, like I say, it's mostly salaries and pensions. But it's I think you can definitely cut a lot. What's funny is that even DoD puts out reports like, yeah, we're actually giving too much money, and we probably don't need this. They're like putting forward the things because they know that cuts are coming, and so they put forward a lot of reports saying like this is stuff that is not really useful that could probably be cut. Like DoD is already ahead of it. Is already ahead of the game on that, which is kind of funny. Like they already know what should be cut, and so if anything is cut, that'll be it. Let's see what's this in the U.S. at least? Is it just abortion? For why I'm against the Republican Party? The Republican Party is like completely against environmental regulations. They're for funding religious schools. They're against abortion, which is it's just you name it. Like what are they for? They're for like tax cuts for the wealthy. Like if anyone can name me a single thing that the Republican Party does that's good, please. I can't think of a single thing. It's amazing to me that so many that it's just all bad ideas, like all completely bad ideas. That somehow it's that Hexa, you can comment. You can comment. It's good. It's good. But yeah, there's just nothing there's nothing good about the Republican Party. I'm not saying the Democratic Party is fantastic, but I'm going to vote for I'm going to vote for a Democrat over a Republican every time, because it is a much more realistic path to what I see as a positive future. Like if we had a parliamentary system, maybe I'd vote for something like the Green Party, but we don't have a parliamentary system. So I'm going to vote for the Democrats because that is the best chance I have to get the policies I want. Voting for anybody else is a waste of a vote. And the Democrats are the only ones that can help us. Is that sad? Sure. But it's the only thing, it's the only viable option is to always vote. And on an individual level, it doesn't matter because they all vote in these blocks, with the exception of Joe Manchin and Sinema. Like, it doesn't matter which Democrat or which Republican. They're all the same because that's how they vote. They all vote the same. So it's just Democrat, it's Team Democrat. Like, that's just the way to go in America. I think when somebody brought up corporatist, they meant the prioritization of capital owners over the working class. Yeah, that's probably what they meant. And I do agree that there is too much of that in my mind in a lot of ways, and it goes all the way up to businesses, and it goes all the way down to like America's worship of the small business owner. So one of the big myths that people have about a corporation, a firm, whether it be a small business or whether it be a huge business, is that they create jobs. The economists the creation of jobs is a big mystery in economics. No one really understands where the creation of jobs comes from, but it's counterintuitive because somebody's like, okay, I'm opening an auto repair shop and I'm employing 20 people. I'm creating 20 jobs, right? Well, you're not really creating 20 jobs because to fill those jobs, you've pretty much 20 people that were in other jobs are leaving their jobs to be part of your business. So yeah, you're building a business and it feels really satisfying in your personal sense that you're building this business, but you're stripping the workers from somewhere else to be part of that business. So you're not really creating jobs. Now, and this is hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around, that firms, like these managers don't get credit for job creation. They shouldn't be credited for job creation. A job is created when the price of labor meets the demand of labor, in a market, and that happens outside of your particular firm. But everybody's now on a state to state level when competing. People can I understand how some of these people work. I'd rather have Boeing in my state versus that state. But when you're talking about on a global scale, whether Boeing should exist, as an entity, if it exists or not, there's still going to be planes because there's still demand for planes. Some other firm will pop up and build them. And so there's this weird, there is kind of this worship of the manager and the owner, the Elon Musk. Oh, Elon Musk is doing so much. No, he's fucking not. He's buying shit and posting on Twitter. All of these workers are doing stuff. Researchers are doing stuff. So I do really, really agree. I'm not saying that owners and managers don't have a function. Of course they do. But I do think that America has a weird worship of this stuff. And so I do agree. But I do think a corporation, I kind of define a corporation a little different than probably the regular person on the street. It's a group of people, in a company, and that company kind of exists, and we're all buying that product. And that because we're buying that product, we're keeping the thing, alive. We'd all like to say oh, isn't Nike so evil for having sweatshops in Vietnam? Yeah, but we're buying those shoes. So it's there's a lot of fault to go around because, there's a lot of moving parts to keep firms and businesses around, so it's yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I can simplistically throw around terms like that. I always get kind of frustrated when people throw around terms like that. Oh, you're just a neoliberal or you're a corporatist. Those are pretty. Song of Ice and Fire characters, most like Hillary, Trump, Bernie, and Buttigieg. Let's see. I mean,
do you ever watch when Buttigieg goes on Fox News?
Oh, he go? No, never do.
Whenever he goes on Fox News, oftentimes they try to get him on something, and he just roasts the shit out of all of them. I love when he's very well spoken, Buttigieg.
He's a guy who he's super smart, and everybody thought he was, because he was only a mayor, that he was out of his league. And it's true, he's inexperienced, but he's so smart that he was able to kind of make up for it. Have you heard any stories about him being over his head as Department of, Secretary of Transportation, going from mayor to that? No.
No.
So I respect him a lot. I don't know if America is going to be electing a gay president anytime soon, but as for characters like these people, it's I don't know if too many A Song of Ice and Fire characters fit with each of them. Because I say, Ice and Fire characters are different from politicians in that they are, a lot of them have real fundamental beliefs, and they're pushing their personal beliefs. You've got a Stannis who is doing something that's not necessarily the popular decision. They're not necessarily listening to the masses. And so each of these people, whether it be Hillary or Trump or Bernie or Buttigieg, you have to remember that they have supporters, and that they have to, in a democracy, you have supporters, and you have to play into those supporters. Trump is evil, not in the sense that the man is evil, though the man is a freaking horrible piece of crap by himself, but his movement and who he inspires and who he empowers is evil. And so it's all the people behind him are evil too. So it's him as well, that's not really what we see in Ice and Fire. In Ice and Fire, we see all of the leaders doing remarkably unpopular things constantly because they don't live in a democracy. So John is trying to save the wildlings, even though no one wants to save the wildlings. Stannis, wants to be the head of the Seven Kingdoms, even though no one wants to be him to be the head of the Seven Kingdoms. It's things like that. So Joffrey, I don't know what he's doing. So that's the thing, is each of these characters has a public persona with a movement behind them that represents things. I've never met any of these people. What if you hung out with Bernie and he just wasn't cool to hang out with? It doesn't. But you're thinking about all of his supporters and what he votes for and what policies he brings about. In Ice and Fire, what policy? The only policies that have been brought about have been war. So it's tough to judge them actually as an Ice and Fire situation. I suppose the only one that's really pushed a lot of real changing policies was Daenerys. Try to think.
What about Jaehaerys? Policies.
Yes, we could go. Yeah, we can go back to Jaehaerys. It's true. The High Sparrow pushed some changes.
All the way back.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to dodge this one. It's just that I think they're fundamentally different. Just because we have a democracy, and democracy brings the good and the bad. Thumbs up. All right, I can't believe we've been going almost 3 hours here. I gotta quit in maybe 5 minutes or so. So,
how do you go on for 3 hours without drinking some water? Come on, man.
I've been drinking. I got a little soda here, but it's I should have.
Was that Coke?
Oh, Justice said I meant voting against your own self-interest. He's talking about okay, so the if I were only thinking about my tax rate, would I vote for Republicans because I just want low taxes? And no, I don't think that voting for Republicans, because I think voting for Republicans is very short-sighted. Cutting social programs is really short-sighted. These people that are oh, I want to cut all these social programs to these people because I want low taxes on myself and I don't care about them. It's do you not understand that if you cut the social programs, people are going to rise up eventually and slit your throat, and tear the whole system down? The whole thing about social programs is they also have the function of keeping society together. And so rich people get to stay rich because society hasn't fallen apart. This is the whole thing. It's so short-sighted. These business people that are I just want low taxes for myself. And screw the world. You're gonna die if you do that. Here's an interesting story and I'll probably make this last, and then in any super chats I'll try to come back later and post in the comments to fix. But when I was in high school, our history teacher, I was probably a junior at the time, our history teacher had all of us go into the gym and play a game. And he had these bags of chips. And we could grab the chips from the bag, and that's your allocated starting wealth. And so there were rules to the game. If you had a certain number of gold coins, you had this much money. And if you traded coins and you got enough matching blue coins, you could get this amount of money, and much matching coins with red, this amount of money. And so there was a trading round where you went around trading and everything. And so I happened to be given a couple gold coins at the beginning. I didn't have to trade very much, and I was in the highest group. So after the first round of trading, we all sat down in these 3 groups. The people that had the lowest amount of money, and the people that had the middle amount of money, and the people that had the most amount of money. And the people in the top group were allowed to add an additional rule to the game every round. Also, each group could vote a person up and a person down to the next group if they wanted. So you could, the middle group could send make one of their own a rich person, and the rich group got to send one of theirs down and make them a poor person. And so then there was a second round of voting after a new rule came in. And the new rule was something like, the rich the gold coins count double or something. It made it even more unreasonable. And so after a second round of voting, nothing changed. It was the same group again. And then the same, and then I think after like the second round, it was like, poor people must give all of their chips to group A. And so it was just so ridiculous. And so after that rule was made, like everyone just started throwing their chips and just like, it was just like, it actually got a little violent. And so of course we sat down afterwards, and it was like, it was so obvious after the whole thing was done that we're like, oh my God, we were so stupid. We were so stupid. And the history teacher told us, like, I've played this game, probably 15 times, and 14 out of 15 times it has turned out like this. Like, the rich group keeps making rules that make it more and more unfair until there's a revolution. And you're like, oh yeah. You're like, what, it's not sustainable if people are stupid like that, And one of the most interesting things is he asked the people that were voted up and down, like, poor person that was made a rich person. When you became a rich person, did you do anything to try to help the lower group that you just came from? And the answer was always no. Now he did say that 1 out of 15 times it did not end in ridiculous revolution. And he said that time they were just making silly rules. Like, you have to balk like a chicken, like every time you do a trade. And you have to and it just became a big laugh riot because they were all doing this like really stupid. But he said that was like the 1 out of 15 times. 14 out of 15 times, Group A kept making dumber and dumber rules until there was revolution. So short-sighted, like tax cuts for the wealthy and bailouts and stuff like that. It's so short-sighted, so dumb. So dumb. The way to keep the system going is a nice progressive tax, high tax on the rich, redistribution through social programs to the poor. And that's the way to create a stable society. But man, it's so dumb. It's so dumb when I hear right-wingers say like, oh, these poor people aren't paying taxes. Like, they really complain about that stuff. I'm like, dude, it's so short-sighted. So when I vote for Democrats, yeah, I'm voting in my self-interest. I don't want my throat slit. But I mean, it's kind of selfish charity, but I mean, you should be charitable to be charitable, but also you should do charity so you don't die. So it's fine. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. This was fun. I'll see you guys next week, and I'll see if anything.
Well, Preston, will this be staying up? This live stream?
Yeah. This was staying up. The other ones didn't stay up because it was a tax thing. I shouldn't have put them up yet. I wasn't approved. But yeah, I wasn't approved to be working in Taiwan. Anyway, yeah. This will stay up. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks, Carmine.
Peace.